If you look at the agricultural sector, it's been hit by low demand because export has shrunk. Mainly our foreign exchange earners like horticulture, tea, coffee, has even been made worse, even some situation in the agricultural sector with the onset of locust. The manufacturing sector, there's low demand, there's a reduction of import of raw materials and other intermediate goods. The financial sector, there is reduced diaspora remittance. There's capital flight as a result of foreigners withdrawing their capital. There's reduced investment inflows. The revenue performance has actually gone down, and all other domestic taxes has also shrunk. If you look at the state of the service sector, tourism, hotels, and all the sectors that have been contributing to the economy are actually doing badly.
Now, with the current hard economic times experienced globally, some Kenyans have resorted to even selling some of their household items to sustain themselves. The government, through the Ministry of Labor, is projecting that at least 1.7 million Kenyans have lost their jobs and a bigger number left vulnerable.
Tunashindwa na kulipa rent ya nyumba, sasa tunauza vitu za nyumba. Sasa mimi jana niliuza kitanda yangu na nikauza ndio nipate pesa ya kuongezea ndio nilipe rent.
Mara unasikia bado ndio amekuja anataka pesa, mtu anafinyika hana chakula, hana kazi juu watu wengi mahali mtu alikuwa anafanya kazi hayuko kazi.
Kwa saa hii ni kama tunahesabu hasara juu ile sales nilikuwa nauza hapo mbeleni iko sasa saa hii naona that ya hiyo.
Huyo mtu hana chakula, kwa hivyo inambidi achukue kitanda ambacho analalia ama godoro lake ama kiti cha kukalia kwa nyumba au meza ndio apate chakula cha kuwapatia watoto wake.
Elsewhere, Rift Valley Regional Commissioner George Natembea and his police counterpart Marcus Ochola have this morning visited Mercy Cherono. A woman was filmed being tied on a motorbike and dragged on a dirt road by police officers. This is after she was transferred to Nakuru this morning for further treatment. Meanwhile, the Director of Criminal Investigations has reacted to the video that has circulated on social media of the woman from Kericho. According to DCI, the 3 officers involved in the incident have already been arrested for further investigation. Elsewhere, the second phase of Kazi kwa Vijana in Kiambu County will see young people involved in brick making and painting of schools. Kiambu County Commissioner says that the project is expected to help more youth in the country.
The second phase of Kazi Mtaani project in Kiambu County is expected to kick off on 1st July. The project will now engage the youth in special projects such as brick making and painting of schools, instead of cleaning the streets and clearing bushes within the county as they have been doing.
2, we're also going to have projects that are going to have a long-term impact, as opposed to currently where we're cutting grass and then after some time the grass will grow again. So we're going to have the youth engaged in specialist jobs like making bricks, putting up toilet facilities in informal settlement areas where there are no toilets, painting schools, health centers.
The Ministry of Gender and Public Services CAS Rachel Shebesh says the project will come up with means of helping mothers, old men and children who have been affected by gender-based violence at this coronavirus pandemic period.
So imeongezeka, mambo ya hiyo GBV imeongezeka, gender-based violence imeongezeka. Na tumekuja na strategy ya Kiambu ya kuwork na county government na county commissioner vile tutaweza kusaidia wamama, how we will be able to rescue them from their homes na hata kuangalia na make sure that they get the right treatment.
The project has been going on in the county and has helped in fighting insecurity within the county.
Tangu hii kazi kuje, wakati janga la corona lilikuja, hatukuwa kazi. Tulikuwa tunatafuta job tunakosa. So huko ndani kijiji tulikuwa tumekaa hivyo, watu wanatembea wanakosa kazi. But wakati
Kazi Mtaani ilikuja, sisi wote tukapata kazi.
Kesi za insecurity katika mji wa Thika zimepungua kwa highest level. Na kwa hivyo ningependa serikali iendelee na hii mradi, na nimefurahishwa sana kwa ile imekuja phase 2 ambayo inaanza mwezi ujao.
More than 20,000 youth have benefited from the project. Aaron Kipkoech, TV47.
All right, and as we continue with the special coverage of the 2020-2021 budget, our reporters are up and about on standby. We have Elizabeth Mutuku from Parliament. We have Mwangi Maina, who is talking to SMEs. We also have Nancy Kimuyu, who is on standby from Treasury. But first, let's bring in Mwangi Maina to the discussion. Mwangi, good afternoon now, not morning anymore. You've been talking to SMEs. Have you talked to more, and what are they telling you?
Well, thank you, Abubakar Abdullahi, coming to you live from the Kencom bus station in downtown Nairobi. And as we have continued to speak to different Kenyans of all walks of life on what they expect this afternoon when the Treasury CS Ukur Yatani will be delivering to the country the 2020-2021 budget. And maybe something that is maybe interesting, Abubakar, is to let you know that not every Kenyan knows that this afternoon, actually, the budget will be read. Some of the Kenyans whom we have interacted to this afternoon are saying that they are not even aware that the country is reading its budget today. But a majority of the Kenyans we have spoken to, they are saying that they would want the government to address matters food security and the prices of food right now in the market, because despite the VAT being reduced from 16% to 14%, Kenyans are saying that they are yet to see the impact of the reduction in VAT. Some of them are saying that the cost and the price of maize flour is high, and they expect that the Treasury CS this afternoon will address matters pertaining to the cost of food.
All right, that is our reporter Mwangi Maina. Of course, he was talking to Kenyans, and part of what they have talked about is not feeling the impact of the tax measures, the drop in tax measures, in as far as questioning the Kenyans and the country is concerned. Nonetheless, we also have Elizabeth Mutuku, who is on standby. Elizabeth, first paint for us a picture of how the situation is like in Parliament today.
Well, good afternoon, Abubakar Abdullahi. Just like you've said, the situation here is dire concerning the today's big day, where Ukur Yatani, who is CS for Treasury, is expected to present the 2.7 trillion budget here, and more of the different sectors being given priority. And I am made to understand, apart from just priority, education has been given a major share. And I am being joined by a member of Parliament of Daragwa, Jeremiah Kioni, to give us a picture of how things will be this afternoon. And not only that, there is the issue of a debt, which has been a major concern to majority of Kenyans. Would like to understand what would have been done and what would be what would have been done in the whole issue of debt of budget in the country. Welcome, Mheshimiwa, and thank you for giving me opportunity today. I understand a debt is one of the greatest challenge in our nation. What would have been done in today's budget?
Without doubt, we have a debt of about 904 billion shillings that we need to repay. But one of the main thing is that it's quite an expensive debt in the understanding that we've been given by those in the economic world. And one of the things that we may need to do as a country is to retire a little bit of the money and perhaps ask for rescheduling of the debt and such things. And I believe that these are things that are in the works, and the government must be doing all these things to make sure that we are able to manage the situation that we are in. But it is good to mention that we are in a situation that we have never been in before in this country. But 2008, 2009, you remember we had some recession in the country. The government came up with a recovery package, what we called then economic stimulus package, and measures that were also put in place that helped us come out of it much faster than perhaps many would have imagined. And I believe even now that the government is in a position to craft measures that would help with Parliament in place, craft measures that would help us come out of the difficulties that we are in. This is a pandemic is a disease that you would be lying to tell any Kenyan that you know when we are coming out of it, or whether we are getting out of it or it's going to get worse. And the best that we can do is to use the resources that we have in the most economic way. And I believe that one of the things is that we may have to move away from some very mega projects, mega undertakings, and deal with survival levels. Of course, again, if we do not carry out some developmental level, you are likely to suffer more. But I think we need to spend our money where we help the Kenyans move on and hope that we get out of this in a quicker way. One of the things that I have in mind is that we have the elderly people, the orphans, persons living with disability. The little support that the government has been giving, since the infrastructure is already there, that needs to be upped. It will really help people, families, out of this difficult situation or during this difficult situation. We need to spend money with areas that can help us grow quickly. I have talked about, I know the government has had mega projects, mega dams that we wanted to do. But instead of now concentrating on the mega dams, is it possible to do the easy way of water harvesting, like water pans within homesteads in Nyandarua, in Daragwa? I have seen that transform lives overnight. Can we help people grow quick crops that can, they can sell? I have done a little bit of avocado in my area. If again that kind of boost is given, it would help. But coming to the bigger issues is that we will also be asking the government to look around for cheaper loans. Is it possible to get a place where countries that can help us retire our rather very heavy, expensive debt?
There is this argument that we are living beyond our means. Is there anything that can be done by the government to ensure that?
I don't think we are living beyond our means. That I will tell you that we are not living beyond our means. We have always to try and do that which is more difficult so that tomorrow is better. You remember, I know that we have had this quarrel about the SGR and the rest, but the people who also sacrificed more than 110-20 years ago to do the railway that we have used for that time, if they have not done what they did, we would not have been able to grow as a country. So this is a sacrifice that is useful. It is only that we have this pandemic that has come, that has made things complicated. What of course is called on us is to reduce our level of recurrent expenditure. We will need to do a drastic reduction of the recurrent expenditure so that we have money that we can use to do a little bit of development while we are catering for the things that must be catered for. We must deal with the debts. If, for example, China has, I know we have borrowed from China, and I'm not saying much, but again, this virus came from not because they wanted it to happen, but unfortunately that is the source. They certainly can also hear our case. We need to become more pragmatic. As Kenyans, we need to pull together the way the president is telling us to do. We need to pull together. It is not time to pull apart. We need to pull together. We need to support, agree with the guidelines, see whether you can bring down the level of the cases that are being reported on a daily basis of COVID, so that we can come out of this scenario.
A lot of our borrowed resources in the country, they go so much into corruption. What could be done unto that?
One of the other thing, of course, is that the wastage that we have seen in the past, where, like you said, resources that we would have used to grow our economy have ended up in people's pockets. That has hit us hard, and it is times like now that we feel the pain. And we can only up our game in terms of fighting corruption. And I think it is important that when any institution has, let me say it that way, that we all must support any person helping us fight corruption. And we must see corruption in its broader sense, not in just looking at when we talk about SGR, you think of mega corruption. Even the small corruption that is happening in some areas. For example, is it possible that some hospitals will be having ICU beds by now? Was it not the fact that somebody misused the money? That kind of corruption must also be addressed. And people who have found themselves culpable one way or another must be exposed. Let me say what I believe. Kama uliiba kitu ya mtu na kitu ya mtu ni kuiba kwa Kenya, haina maana yeye ati uchaguliwe tena kwanza kusumama. You know, a punishment that happens immediately, that would send a very strong message, because we steal so that we can look for elective positions to come and defend or protect that which we stole. That is that's a thing that has happened over the time.
In today's budget,
we need to make sure that those people who are suspected of having stolen are not given an opportunity to vie for any elective position, and even appointments will never come their way.
Thank you. Yes. In today's budget, education, infrastructure, and health sector, somehow they've been given a priority, but majority of Kenyans will argue that health sector would have been given much priority more than education, considering that schools are not opened. What's your take on that?
Without doubt, a lot of money has been set aside for the health ministry, the health sector, both at the national level and the county level. So when you are looking at the amount of money that has been given to the health sector, you
Well, that is our parliamentary affairs reporter, Elizabeth Mutuku. She was speaking to Ndaragwa lawmaker, Jeremiah Kioni, of course, who, like many other of his colleagues whom we have had in this broadcast, is hinting at a drop in recurrent expenditure. Remember, the current budget has 1.3 trillion shillings set aside for recurrent expenditure. Of course, the lawmaker also talked about the country's debt, which now stands at 6.2, this despite Parliament increasing the debt ceiling to 9 trillion shillings. Remember, this is a wall-to-wall coverage of the budget. Our reporters, as earlier said, are on standby. Let's bring in Nancy Kimuyu, who is at Treasury now. Nancy, good afternoon. What should we expect from the building that is just behind you today?
Well, a very good afternoon, Abubakar. As you can see behind me, I am just outside the National Treasury building. There is pomp and color. Everything has been set. Just a few minutes before the man of the hour, the man we have been waiting for, CS Ekuru Yutani, to come out, of course, holding the briefcase which contains the budget. He will display the briefcase and pictures will be taken. He should be accompanied by the PS and also members of the committee from the National Treasury Committee, and also members of the Budget and Appropriations Committee from the National Assembly. Now from there, it is expected that he will move to Parliament, outside Parliament. Also pictures of him will be taken holding the briefcase, and will proceed to enter the chambers. However, this time it will be different, as the numbers of the members who are supposed to enter the chambers have been limited in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the cocktail party, which is normally done after the highlight of the budget, will not be done, of course, still because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this year's budget comes at a time where the country is battling a pandemic. It is a tough economic environment for businesses. This include, but not limited to, the tourism sector, the hospitality sector, the education sector, and of course the industrialization sector, the import and export center. But Kenyans are expectant that the funds will be allocated accordingly, more especially in matters to do with health, especially during this time that we are experiencing a pandemic. Now, from this side, that's all I can tell you for now, as we are waiting for the
trillion of that will be used in recurrent expenditure, meaning this is what the government will use to pay its workers, to pay its expenditure. 904 billion shillings as well has been set aside to pay debt obligations. This, of course, as well eliciting reaction from economists who are urging today the government that the government should have renegotiated some of the debts and, of course, both time in as far as the payment is concerned. That was Nancy speaking to us. Let's bring in Mwangi Maina back to the broadcast. Mwangi, good afternoon. Earlier on, you talked of speaking to Kenyans and their expectations. You painted a picture of some even not knowing whether the budget statement and the budget presentation will be done in Parliament today. But nonetheless, what is the concern in as far as Kenyans and their voices are concerned? Is there anything that is coming out as a similarity in their concern?
Well, Abubakar Abdullahi, thank you. As I was explaining to you before, we were at the city market, we were in different bus stops within the city, and a majority of Kenyans are concerned about the prices of food in the country. Every Kenyan is saying that the government should check and should check the prices of food, especially maize flour, especially cooking oil, and those basic commodities that Kenyans rely on a daily basis. Others, especially the matatu operators, are saying that the government should ensure that the prices of oil, because the global index has gone down, and therefore the government should not raise the tax that they tax on fuel, therefore making sure that the prices of fuel remain low until the world conquers COVID-19. Some other Kenyans are saying that the government should open the borders to ensure that there is interaction between Kenyans who are in Nairobi and those who are in the rural areas, because they say that some of their livelihood, they get the livelihood between the interaction between those who are in Nairobi and those who are in the rural areas. Other Kenyans have concerns in regard to alcoholic beverages. Some of them are saying that they do not see the importance of alcoholic beverages and cigarettes, and therefore they are calling on the government to tax the alcoholic beverages and cigarettes so that they do not bring the tax to other basic commodities that Kenyans require. Abubakar Abdullahi, that is what the Kenyans here are saying as they expect Ukur Yatani to read the budget this afternoon.
All right, Mwangi, before I let you go, let me ask you one final question. You talked to employers, people who have small businesses and have had to employ a number of people to operate in these businesses. What are they telling you? Have they fired some people in as far as the COVID-19 hit is concerned onto their businesses, which in a nutshell will translate to job loss?
Yes, Abubakar Abdullahi, according to those business owners whom we spoke to, they have said that if a job had employed 5 people, they have lost between 2 and 3 people because they were not in a position to sustain them. Because they're saying the income they are receiving as at now is too low to sustain themselves, to sustain their businesses, and to sustain their employees. So most of them resulted to not firing them as per se, but giving them some time to relax at home before they wait for things to get back to normal. But this is the appeal they are having to the government, that the government should boost the SMEs so that they are in a position to make sure that their businesses are up and running, and so that they can be able to pay their employees, the employees they had, the people who do different tasks, the people who do different activities in their job activities here in the country and in the capital, Nairobi.
And that is our reporter Mwangi Maina live from Nairobi, painting a picture of what the concern of Kenyans is ahead of the budget statement that will be presented in Parliament at 3 p.m. by Treasury CS Ukur Yatani. Thank you, Mwangi Maina. Earlier on, we talked of the gainers, and as far as this 2.7 trillion budget is concerned, let's look at some of the losers in the budget. Transport is the biggest lead loser, losing 45 billion shillings. Housing and urban development, of course, ICT, defense, energy, devolution, parliament, and judiciary as well. Of course, interesting as well to note of the judiciary. This statement was made earlier on, but it comes at the backdrop of the back and forth between President Uhuru Kenyatta, the executive, and the judiciary, and as far as David Maraga's leadership is concerned. Of course, the president having reservations in as far as the employment of 41 judges whose names were fronted by the Judicial Service Commission, but the president, of course, giving his reservation as to why he didn't ascend and sign for employment of those names. It's almost 30 minutes past the hour. Time for us to take another short break. We'll be back with the discussion on the budget and understanding of where the coins will be heading to after this break. Welcome back. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. We are making sense of the numbers, the statistics, the budget 2020-2021. Of course, to make sense of that, let's get back to our discussion. Our guest now in studio, Dr. David Kabata, who was with us for more than an hour now. Daktari, if you look at Kenya's debt structure and compare it to what it is now, if you do a simple comparison of how the situation was in 2009, 2010 to what it is now, there is an increase in commercial debt, an increase of more than 30%, from 4% to 35% as of now. Why is it so?
Abubakar, we have a debt of about 6.2 trillion, 6.5 trillion. Mm-hmm. And about 3 trillion is domestic debt. Mm-hmm. Another 3.2 trillion is the external debt. And what happened in 2014 is that Kenya became a middle economy, middle class economy. And when Kenya became a middle class economy, then what it meant is that it became difficult for us to be able to get the loans for low income countries, what we call the concessional loans. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what happened is that we started going to the market to borrow in what we call the commercial loans. The challenge with the commercial loans is that they are usually very expensive because you get the money at the commercial rate. So you get money at maybe 5, 6, or 7, or 8% interest rate, compared to the concessional loan, which goes to between 1 to 1.5%. Mm-hmm. So the main reason as to why the commercial, we had an increase in the commercial loan was that basing of the economy to be a middle class economy.
And when we talk of commercial loans, do we mean it is banks that are lending to the government?
We have banks lending to the government. Mm-hmm. Actually, that is what we call the domestic borrowing. The question you asked there before, mm-hmm, about the interest rate, when you lower the interest rate, mm-hmm, is that money going to, are the banks going to lend to the common mwananchi? And allow me to add on that and say that that is not going to happen as long as the domestic loan continue increasing, meaning that the government is getting money from the banks, because mm-hmm, what usually happens is that the government gets money from the banks using what we call the treasury bills. Mm-hmm. And if the interest in treasury bills is good enough for the banks cannot lend to the common mwananchi, basically because it is very risky to lend to the common mwananchi. You will have to chase him around in this country, uh-huh, if he defaults for the money. But you see, the government will. And
does that, let me interject you at that point, does that explain the reason as to why banks will be more interested in lending to the government than to SMEs?
Yes, it is more risky to lend to the SMEs than the government, because one, the government can never default, mm-hmm, on loans, because any default on loans will make it very impossible for the government to get money, especially any other loan. Second, the government has provisions for what we call the inflation. Mm-hmm. If the inflation increases, then the government has the provision for that when they are repaying back their money. Mm-hmm. So the banks will always lean on lending to the government more than the common mwananchi. And that is why I'm saying, however romantic the loans are, the bank will not lend to the common mwananchi if the government continue borrowing domestically.
All right, looking at the budget deficit for this year, it stands at 823 billion shillings, of which the government intends to borrow both locally and internationally. The government intends to borrow from within 468 billion shillings through treasury bonds, yes, and it intends to borrow internationally 349 billion shillings. This, of course, again, painting a picture of a government wanting to borrow locally.
Yes. And actually, that is a big problem to the SMEs. There is no way the banks are going to lend to the SME when the government is willing to get the money from them. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to what happened in 2002 when Kibaki came into power, what Kibaki did, the Kibaki economists did, mm-hmm, is that they lowered the interest rate on the treasury bills. And the banks started hawking loans to their offices. Why? Because they did not have any other person to lend to except the common mwananchi. That is why they were hawking loans. Today they are not going to hawk because they know the government is going to borrow money from them.
And part of the argument that the banking sector has put forth in as far as who to lend and how much to lend is concerned is on the interest rate.
Yes, they usually talk about the interest rate. In fact, the central bank has done a lot, especially when it comes to lowering what we call the base rate, the bank rate, which determines the interest rate. But unless we have another way of pushing the banks to lend to the common mwananchi, which I don't see, it is very difficult. One, the banks are not in the business of resuscitating other people's businesses or failing businesses. And I keep saying that. The banks are in business to make money. And that is one thing that many people, especially the owners of SMEs, should understand. So waiting for the banks to come and resuscitate your businesses is at all order.
All right, looking at the budget deficit, our budget deficit is higher than that of the EAC's convergence criteria of more than 3%. What kind of a picture does that paint first?
The problem actually is never the deficit budget. Because you cannot prosper even as an individual without borrowing. The problem is, where are you taking the deficit? If you look at some of these big countries, they have big deficit in their budgets, but the money is used in the right way. That is the biggest, those are some of the things that we need to realize. So the deficit budget is not a problem. Actually, you cannot prosper even you as an individual without loans.
All right, David, you say deficit is not a problem. Earlier on in this discussion, you said borrowing is not a problem, provided it's borrowed for, of course, usage and proper usage. Then where is the problem? If borrowing is not bad, if deficit is not bad, yet we have loans as a country to service?
Yes, because we do not use the money in projects that are going to do what we call to repay back those loans. I'll tell you the truth. The biggest problem with our budget is the process of coming up with that budget. And I'll tell you why, Abubakar. The budget process making starts in August 31st every year. That is when the ministries are supposed to bring their budgets and all those things. The common mwananchi is supposed to play a very major role in public participation during the budget. How many of us here have gone for any public participation, especially when it comes to that making of this budget? Nobody.
Let me pose that question to Joe Halenda, who joins us in the broadcast as well. Joe, Dr. David talks of public participation. Do people even participate in this budgetary making procedure?
Public participation is a constitutional requirement in any government undertaking. It must involve its people. So do we see this more often, and how is public participation carried out? Those are the key fundamental questions that we should be asking. Because sometimes you see the government advertise for these things that are supposed to go on, the public participation, advertised that such and such a day, public participation at the Parliament building to give their views on budget process. Then, is mwananchi given an opportunity through that advertisement or given an avenue how he can be able to channel his view?
All right, we'll come to the question of whether mwananchi is given a chance to have their view and say, but is mwananchi even around to have that say?
Yes. Yes. You can see, actually, this one starts even from the lower level. Apart from key roles that most of our representatives or elected leaders are supposed to be done, like MCAs, apart from oversight, representation, and legislation, they are supposed to be in contact with the mwananchi so that they can collect opinion from mwananchi to be able and channel it up to the executive through the county assembly. That's the same way parliamentarians are supposed to do their job. They're supposed to actually air views and opinions from mwananchi, and also mwananchi is given an opportunity through petition of parliament so that he can give his views to do with the budget making process.
All right, Dr. David, earlier on we talked of the mixed reaction in as far as this budget is concerned. If you were to be challenged as a lead economist to craft an ideal budget for such a time, what would you give preference and prominence to?
One of the areas that I would think about is health, because as I said, if people are not healthy, they cannot produce, and the budget is made through production.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are not, how do we increase our revenues when people are not productive? So can we think about the health of our people? We have the issue of the education system. Look at the education sector. It is already collapsed. It has already collapsed because of the COVID-19.
Before you move to any other point, you talk of health. What in specific would you mean in health?
Now, when it comes to the health, we need now to start asking ourselves, how can we be able to help our people, even the ones who are even in the counties, so that we are prepared for any eventuality in case of this challenge, the challenge of COVID becomes a big issue. The president talked about the isolation beds, increasing the isolation beds to 300 in every county. Actually, that is something that would have been done 3 months ago when we started, when he talked about the lockdown and social distancing. Now, we need to also make sure that our counties, we have enough manpower, especially the health manpower in our counties, so that they can be able to help us in case we have some more big issues. I said this is the best time for our country to revamp the health sector in this country, because there is a pandemic that pushes us to do that.
And is it coming as a shock that this pandemic is coming with a glaring overview of how bad the healthcare system in the country is?
It's a big challenge, especially when you understand that we have been allocating money to some of those counties, especially putting money in some of those counties, health money in those counties. That is why I said that our county government system should be looked into, because we cannot put about 2.4 trillion in counties, health money included there, but we cannot see anything. And especially when it comes to some of these challenges that we have right now.
All right, Joe, let me ask you this. The current data and statistics in as far as job losses is that 1.6 million Kenyans have already lost their jobs, and this number in the coming weeks is set to increase. What best then should be done, can be done to caution these Kenyans who have been rendered jobless as of now?
Most of the people who have been rendered jobless are coming from, let's say, self-employment and SMEs and microeconomy. And what we have earlier said, we need the government to come in and put measures or put initiative that will assist some of these sector to come up and be able to continue being in business and to be able to keep people in business. That is how we are going to survive. But if most of these stimulus that are being produced and the budget that is going to be read today should actually go in the direction that they are supposed to help the small businesses and micro businesses to move forward and not to be rendered out of business during this pandemic period.
Dr. David, is financial assistance the most pressing of issues that SMEs need as of now?
It is one of the areas that we need to look at, because we are talking about collapsed businesses because of incapability of production and also the issue of social distancing and lockdown. We have SMEs that cannot be able to bring their products to Nairobi just because Nairobi is inaccessible. That is what we are talking about. So how do we cushion some of those businesses? One is to give them grants. That is what we are saying.
And so not loans, you said earlier on.
Yes. You see, if you give them loans, when they are not producing, you are increasing the burden, because you are going to give a loan and they will be expected to pay the loan as quickly as possible, unless you give a moratorium of about a year before they start paying loan. I don't see any need of them getting loans. They should get grants so that they can continue producing slowly and also keep their employees within the organization.
And looking at a global perspective, this recession has affected more than just Kenya, more than Africa and the region, the continent. It has affected the entire world. What are the projections in as far as a possible economic comeback is concerned?
We have a big challenge, basically because one of the areas that have really been hampered by the COVID problem is the airline industry or the transport industry. So it means that we have a challenge of imports and also a challenge of exports. Actually, some of the sectors in this country, such as tourism, have collapsed. Hospitality industry have collapsed. Exportation of some of these products like tea, flowers and all that, they have a challenge. So we expect a big challenge as long as COVID-19 is here and as long as we do not have a vaccine, because I don't see how countries will open when they do not know they do not have a mechanism of dealing with some of these challenges.
Joe, David talks of a possible reopening and of course the consequences that will come with. There are those who flaunt the idea that if we can reduce the number of infections, flatten the curve in some way, even though what we have seen is contrary to that, there are prospects of a possible reopening. Is that viable as of now?
As of now, that is not possible, but we need to relook and evaluate how we are dealing with this COVID-19. Like the way Tanzania is doing. Actually Tanzania has copied what Sweden is doing. Then as a country, Kenya, we need to reevaluate some of the measures, some of the policies, some of the directives we are putting in place so that we can be able to ease, not just open the economy at once, but seeing certain sectors which can be reopened slowly as we move on so that we can survive during this period.
And what are some of these sectors that in your own view should be considered?
You see, like transport sector. Transport sector needs to be relooked at and see how are we effecting this lockdown and how are we going to help businesses which are dependent on transport, because some of the things that are being produced are supposed to be moved from here to Busia or from here to Turkana. But the problem is that we have lockdown in Nairobi. So which measures can we put in place as a government to help producers, to help businesses which depends on certain products from Nairobi or from Mombasa so that they can be able to move forward?
All right, Dr. David, there are companies, if not firms, that have been bragging about profitability year in, year out for the last decade. That seemingly has been tested by the COVID-19 hit. It is these seemingly same firms who, as of now, are in a bad state, which begs the question, if a company was bragging about profitability for the last 10 years, what kind of an effect does a 3-month slowdown as such have on such a company?
Abubakar, one of the things that we need to understand is that during COVID, it's not about how much money you are competition. Allow me to call it competition. It's about 4 things. It's about survival, adaptation, transformation, and also collaboration. Organizations right now can only survive through collaboration. What can't we do? And how can we be helped by another organization to do that? I'll give you an example of supermarkets. Supermarkets can be able to, can come together with the logistic companies to be able to transport their goods and services to those people who cannot get them. That is what we are talking about collaboration. So any organization that is talking about making abnormal profit, allow me to call them abnormal profit, right now, it is misguided because this is the time of survival and collaboration.
All right. Well put, Dr. David. My question is, for the last 10 years, we have seen companies that year in, year out were bragging of their profits. And seemingly in 3 months' time, they are the lead in decrying the COVID-19 economic hit on the same firms.
Yeah, actually, that was supposed to happen. I'll give you an example of the telecommunication companies. one of the things that they were told is that they should lower the rate, the transaction rate. That one obvious affects their profitability or how much money they collect. Look at the banking industry. They were also told to relax their transaction cost. So these are some of the mitigations that were supposed to happen because organization need to play part, especially when it comes to control of the COVID. I'll give you an example also of the beer industry. With the closure of the bars, they are not going to make any money. And it is because if some of these things are not done, what is going to happen is that we are going to have a bigger problem than that. So it is expected, but the challenge is that one, when we have such a situation, the government will collect less. Individuals like me will get very low dividend, especially the shareholders, or nothing in the next financial year. So are some of the challenges that we have to go through so that we can be able to solve the problem.
All right, Joe, we are optimistic that the curve could be flattened, but if that doesn't happen, if the situation gets from where it is to worse, what possible options are then out there?
Specifically, we cannot say there are other possible options that can be explored if the situation doesn't get better. What we need to do is to stick to the survival mode. Stick to the survival mode, follow the directives, social distancing, sanitizing, washing hands, and looking at the possible avenues that can help our economy to sustain us during the pandemic. Those are the only way we are going to go through this period.
All right, Dr. David, for those who are wondering what the correlation between health and economics is this a clear indication through this pandemic that there is a correlation between the two?
Actually, I've been telling people that when we are teaching students, we tell them that the only challenges, macroeconomic challenges that are there, are the political in nature. But right now, what this COVID-19 has shown us is that the social factors can be so detrimental, especially when the health issue comes in. And you can see that there's a very big correlation between healthy people and productivity of a country. Yes.
All right. Of course, we are talking and making sense of the budget 2020-2021. Of course, those are live pictures you see on your screen. That's the National Treasury, where the CS is expected to be moving from the National Treasury to Parliament a little bit later to present, of course, to not just Parliament, but also Kenyans who will be watching what the interest is. Those are live pictures as well from Parliament Road. Of course, our reporters are equally on standby to bring us up to speed with the latest that is happening. Remember, the CS is expected to present the budget at 3 p.m. in the National Assembly. We have our ears, our eyes up and about as it happens. Of course, we'll be bringing you live pictures. Dr. Let me get back to you. You say there is a correlation between the economy and the health of the people. Is the economy then, has the economy over the years failed to invest in the health of the people?
Yes, because if you actually, this is not just a problem in Kenya. It is a global problem. And actually what COVID-19 has done is also to put question mark on what we call capitalism. Because if you have a system where people are producing, but when a simple problem such as COVID-19 comes in, a big economy like US cannot be able to deal with it. A capitalistic economy like US cannot be able to deal with it. Then it tells you that we have a challenge. We have not been investing in what we call our people's health in this
to an extent that the world was not prepared for such a pandemic. So going forward, we are going to change how we are going to deal with business. We are going to focus more on human factor, which is specifically health.
All right, this is not the first pandemic that the world is grappling with. What guarantee is there that the world, the global economy will not get back to a default setting?
Not getting back to a default setting, but we have seen the way the doctors explain, there are 5 things which are happening: surviving, adapting, collaboration. In terms of us adapting and collaborating with each other, we are seeing countries that were not able to talk to each other, they are now talking to each other and helping each other on how to help its citizens. Mm-hmm. We have seen Cuba sending doctors worldwide. We have seen Germany helping other countries in Europe. We are seeing US, Donald Trump talking to China and looking for avenues how to help its citizens and how to see that the economy does not receive a thorough beating to be able to hold on and save its people. So we are going to adapt. But in terms of adapting as we move on, are other countries which are already the third world countries, which are already facing other challenges, are they going to be wrapped in, or are these superior countries going to move on and leaving those countries behind? Actually, that should be the major question, and we should be seeing this third world country leadership being more proactive on coming to the worldwide scene to seek help and to seek assistance in terms of helping this country to move to the next stage after this pandemic.
All right, Joe, point made. Let's cross over to Parliament now, where I understand we have live pictures from Parliament. Currently addressing the media is nominated Member of Parliament, Denita Ngate. Let's cross over there and listen in.
Hasa watu walio na ulemavu. So mimi kama mbunge wao nina matarajio makubwa sana kwa watu wangu ambao ni watu walio na ulemavu. Nina matarajio makubwa katika vijana, katika budget ya sasa hivi, kwa sababu umeona vijana wengi hawana kazi. Corona imechukua kazi zote na zile expectations ambazo vijana walikuwa nazo. Kwa hivyo kwa niaba yangu binafsi kama mbunge wa watu walio na ulemavu nchini Kenya, mimi kama mbunge pia kutoka eneo langu la Migori pale Isebania boda, umeona corona inaingia na upande ule, tunataka tujue tu ni jinsi gani ambavyo bajeti hii inaweza kutusaidia sisi kama vijana na sisi kama watu walio na ulemavu nchini Kenya na sisi kama wamama nchini Kenya. Kwa hivyo niko na matarajio makubwa sana, labda tukiona hivyo tunaweza tukaelewa.
Labda mheshimiwa, swali langu pia kuhusu watu ambao other social other contributors or other measures to counter COVID-19. Do you feel disabled persons have appropriate measures to counter COVID-19?
Nimeuliza swali kwamba katika hii COVID-19 ni jinsi gani ambavyo watu walio na ulemavu wamehudumiwa. Mimi ni kwanza ningependa kusema hivi. Serikali imejaribu kwa watu walio na ulemavu. Kwanza umeona kwamba serikali imeweka kando ile tunasema pesa ya kucushion watu walio na ulemavu. Tunavyoongea sasa hivi tuko na kama milioni 200 ambayo serikali imetenga ili watu walio na ulemavu waweze kuandikishwa haraka. 200 million ni pesa ambayo tunapoongea sasa hivi tunapata kwamba katika kila constituency, katika kila eneo bunge, watu 100 walio na ulemavu wanakuwa enlisted through the Ministry of Interior ili waweze kuwa kusaidiwa na serikali through the 200 million ambayo president ameweka aside. Hiyo ni wamejaribu, lakini mahitaji ya watu walio na ulemavu sio mahitaji ambayo ni mahitaji ya wakati wa corona peke yake. Ni mahitaji ambayo ni consistent. Wajua watu walio na ulemavu, kila nyumba nchini Kenya iko na mlemavu katika nyumba. Hiyo ni utafiti ambao umefanyika. Kwa hivyo na mahitaji ya watu walio na ulemavu to do with the vitu kama diapers, wale ambao hawajui kwamba watu walio na ulemavu wanatumia diapers, watu walio na ulemavu wanatumia urine bags kwa wanaume, watu walio na ulemavu wanahitaji chakula na wanahitaji lishe na kila kitu ambayo ni kitu safi. Kwa hivyo mahitaji watu walio na ulemavu wako na mahitaji ya mazingira safi, mazingira ambayo ni ya ile tunaita kwa kimombo dignifying lives kwa watu walio na ulemavu. Kwa hivyo mimi kama mbunge wao, na watu pia wako wa walemavu ambao ni watu ambao kwa kimombo wanaitwa deaf na wale watu wa kutumia sign language. Hao ni watu ambao katika hii fight ya corona lazima tuhakikisha kwamba katika ile message yote ambayo tunaileta nje ili Wakenya waweze kupata information ya kuhusu jinsi ya kujikinga na corona, lazima pia kukuwe na hiyo information ambayo ni ya sign language kwa watu walio na ulemavu waweze kupata hiyo information ambayo itawasaidia. Kwa hivyo Kenya haiwezi kuwa ni nchi ambayo inakuwa sawa sawa bila kuangalia mahitaji ya watu wake walio na ulemavu. Otherwise tutabaki nyuma na tutasukumana na nyinyi, alafu mambo haitakuwa sawa sawa. Kwa hivyo Kenya na hii budget ambayo inasomwa leo, mimi nina uhakika kwamba itakuwa budget ambayo ni inclusive. Budget ambayo inaongelea wamama, watu wa kawaida, inaongelea vijana na inaongelea watu walio na ulemavu. Kwa sababu pia persons with disabilities needs are unique na ni nyingi. Na kwa hivyo tusipowaweka needs zao katika hiyo tunasema kwamba ni budget, hakuna namna. Kwa sababu mimi kama mbunge nimekuja nikagundua kwamba the only way that persons with disabilities in this country are going to move forward is to ensure that they have the correct laws na kuhakikisha kwamba mahitaji yao yanawekwa katika ile tunaita bajeti kama hii ambayo tunaongelea siku ya leo. Hivyo ndivyo tu tunaweza kuhakikisha kwamba walemavu hawaachwi nyuma wakati wengine wote wanasonga mbele. Kwa hivyo hiyo ni mambo yangu na ni matarajio yangu kwa niaba ya watu walio na ulemavu ambao ninawakilisha katika jumba hili la bunge. Thank you for persons with disabilities to work your story. You know, I used to work in the media before I got here, so I know.
Of course, those are live pictures from Parliament where lawmakers are currently streaming in. Of course, the Member of Parliament there, the nominated Member of Parliament, elucidating the interest of people living with disability, the youth and women. Of course, those are pre-budget reaction. We also have live pictures from Treasury where we are monitoring how the situation is there. Nonetheless, let's get back to our discussion and bring in Dr. David Kabata, who is an economist. David, there are those who hold the view that in such extraordinary times, print more money, but tame inflation. Does that economically work?
Well, when you print more money, how do you tame inflation?
But there are possibilities of doing so.
Inflation is too much money chasing very few goods. Mm-hmm. So when you print money, what you are doing, you are increasing the money that is circulating in the economy. Now, in an economy like Kenya, when production is very low, what is going to happen is that the demand of goods and services is going to go up. Mm-hmm. Yes.
But the leftist economists who argue that you can print more money and check the inflation. I have an idea and an outline of where this money will be used and to whose hands this money will get to.
But the problem in this country is not the amount of money that is that is in the central bank. The problem that we have is the circulation of the money in the economy, and I think we need to think about how we can be able to help our people get spend, because if people are not spending, then the economic part of the demand part of the economy is not working. So in an economy like Kenya, I don't think we have reached that point of printing money so that we can be able to
however extreme it may sound, can it be an option?
We tried it in 1992, during the 1992 general election, when money was printed for political purposes. Then you can see even today we have never fully recovered from the problem. So why do we take ourselves to the same problem that we were in 1992?
All right, we talk of the national budget. Let's get to individuals' budgets. Not, of course, through the stakeholders and the state and the departments, but rather the common mwananchi. And talk of financial discipline at such a time. How best should people spend under such a time?
You know, Kenyans live beyond their means, and that is why you see we are talking about a problem of the government living beyond its means, but we also have Kenyans having the same problem. Mm-hmm. And that is why you see when it comes to the mobile loans, Kenyans are very good at getting money from there. Right now, we are surviving. Everybody is surviving, from the government to us as individuals. So what we need to do is to spend on those things that are very, very important to us: rent, food, clothing, the basic ones. All those are the big things. We are telling the government not to spend in big projects. I've even heard the MPs talking about it here. Why is it that we individuals want to spend money in big projects ourselves, in our own small ways?
And let me bring Joe to the discussion then at that point. Joe, is it a reflection of what even is within the circles of people that we see at a national level as well?
Away from expensive commercial.
Yes, it's a reflection that we are seeing at individual level, because currently if you move around anywhere, big structures, and people are doing their own serious projects which require serious money, but in real sense we are supposed big projects which are taking more money from an individual are supposed to be on hold for the time being, so that after the recovery or after this pandemic you can resume those projects. But that's the same, and we are seeing also the government is just doing the same.
I think the solution to the debt in this country is to renegotiate some of those.
All right, Joe, thank you for making time for us. Of course, Joe Halende is a political commentator who was weighing his thoughts into this discussion. But nonetheless, Dr. David is with us and will be with us to make sense of the budget even after the presentation. And I understand at that point we have live pictures as well from Parliament and in Treasury as well. There's quite a number of performances, I'm told. Let's cross over there and enjoy ourselves.
Haya, ukuri achani bajeti nzuri ya wananchi. Haya, tuendelee. Bajeti ya wananchi, bajeti ya hivyo tu hiyo kizungu tu.
Ati kuna nyingine anko.
Sawa.
Jesus, he love you too much, too much, too much, SS love. Ati baba, umejua kunifurahisha, na ndio umejua kunifurahisha, baba.
Sasa mimi naiba nasema citizen responsibility, na wewe unaanza sasa ile ya kusafisha mkono.
Well, who said it was all doom and gloom? Such a performance from young kids at a time when the pomp and color associated with the budget reading process may have been reduced, but nonetheless, he used reggae, which I suppose that was the song, and did not have any political communication to it. Nonetheless, we have live pictures as well from Treasury, where we are monitoring how the situation is in as far as any movement. The CS moving from there to Parliament to present the budget. I understand the budget is set to be presented at 3 p.m. That is 40 minutes from now. Of course, Kenyans as well across the country waiting for the presentation in as far as the 2.7 trillion budget is concerned. The gainers, the losers, as earlier talked about. And the top 10, just a recap of the top 10 gainers in as far as the budget is concerned. The county assemblies, the county governments, Treasury, of course, the infrastructure, defense, university education, which is in line with education. That is now the biggest gainer from this budget, apart from the presidency. The presidency, one will not and ask why. This is because the budget for the Nairobi Metropolitan Service is included in that. Of course, we have also seen the back and forth between the county government of Nairobi and the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, both led, one by Governor Mike Sonko, the other one by Badi. Energy also is among the top 10 gainers from this budget. A budget that still has a deficit of 823 billion shillings, of which the government intends to borrow both internally and externally. The borrowing rate internally, the government is eyeing borrowing 468 billion shillings through treasury bonds, and it intends also to borrow externally 349.7 billion shillings. Of course, this coming at a time when the country is grappling with the economic hit of COVID-19. This also comes at the backdrop of the tax measures that were put in place. Remember, in March, President Uhuru Kenyatta, of course, announcing a drop from 16% to 14% in taxes. Of course, corporation tax was also reduced. In March, remember, the government also outlined several tax measures that were intended to caution Kenyans. This further, of course, is an additional 53.7 billion shillings, 53.7 billion shillings that was set aside to caution 8 sectors. We'll tell you what those 8 sectors are. Education, of course, SMEs, infrastructure, health, agriculture, tourism, environment, water, and employment. I understand we have our reporter on standby, Nancy Kimuyu. Let me hand it over to her. She is at Treasury as of now. Nancy.
Yes, Abu Bakar, as you can see, just moments away, the CS Ekurietani is expected to come out just a few minutes. As you can see, the cars have already been parked. The cars that he will go to Parliament, it is a Passat, 2 Passats cars that have been parked. There are different people who are standing just outside the National Treasury. The media is set. Everyone is set to listen to see the CS come out. Of course, with the briefcase. Now it is expected that there will not be so many people that will come out with him. Of course, in the light of the COVID-19 pandemic, we expect, although the Principal Secretary for the Treasury, Julius Muia, will be with him, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Nelson Kashuhe, will also be there, and also probably the Controller of the Budget, Agnes Odhiambo. We are just waiting. Just any moment from now, he will be coming out, and we will see the way forward to this.
Nancy, let me ask you, in comparison to the pomp and color that we saw in the budget presentation last year, of course, COVID has halted that, but is it pomp-free? Is it color-free now?
On the contrary, it is not color-free. It is not gloomy as many people would have thought. It looks, the setup looks really nice. Everything is in place. The color is there, and probably the changes we might see from the previous budget might be how the members of the committees are going to stand. Probably they won't be very close to each other. They will be wearing masks. They will maintain a distance of 1 meter, and as they head to Parliament, only a few of the members will be allowed to enter the chambers. This is, of course, from the directive of the Ministry of Health in the light of COVID-19. Yes.
Nancy, in many instances, we have seen those in authorities, irrespective of which office they hold, often telling the public to observe social distance, to put on a mask and follow the guidelines. Are government officials, at where you are as well, following the government's directive?
Yes, indeed. As you can see, we've seen the many government officials are putting on their mask masks appropriately at the distance of 1 meter. They have maintained it. If my cameraman Elvis can just show you that there are officials that are standing just next to the writing of the National Treasury and Planning, and you can see that they are all in masks and they have maintained a distance of 1 meter. Yeah. Yes.
All right, thank you, Nancy, for that report. Of course, those are live pictures from Treasury, where CS is expected to make his way out to Parliament, of course, head to Parliament as well.
Okay, Abu Bakar, what I can also tell you is that the red carpet that you see outside the National Treasury was being cleaned, has been cleaned so much. The cleaners were vacuuming the area for so long, and also the chambers at Parliament have been sanitized from last night to today morning. That was the activity that was going on, of course, in preparation for today's budget reading, just to ensure that the members are safe, that the place is clean, the place is sanitized, and that everyone is safe, of course, as they try to curb the spread of this virus. This will be a very different budget reading, of course. Things are not as normal, and it is because of the pandemic, but we are hopeful that things will go well, considering that the measures put in place by the Ministry of Health have been adhered in this process. We hope that it will be maintained up to the very end. The cars have been parked ready for the CS. As soon as he comes out, we expect to see him display the briefcase and have a photo op where pictures will be taken of him and the PS and probably a few members of the committee. And immediately after that, he is expected to enter the Passat vehicle that is parked right outside the building, where he will head to Parliament. On arrival to Parliament, he is still expected to have pictures outside Parliament, just very few pictures outside Parliament with a few of the committee members, and proceed to the chambers of Parliament. Now, in Parliament they will not go as many members of the committees as it has been done previously, and this is because of the COVID-19 directives that have been put out that only 66 members will be allowed to sit in the chambers. Now, after that, once he arrives at Parliament, the Speaker of the National Assembly will welcome him to read the budget statement to the people. We also remain optimistic to see if the current chairman will. They're coming out now.
Well, that is Treasury CS Ukur Yatani, the man whose the country's eyes are on him, faking at least a smile. Or is he at a time when the country is, of course, under the ravages of COVID-19, the economic hit of COVID-19 palpable? Treasury CS smiling amidst a budget that has been touted to be his biggest headache. Nonetheless, a smile there. He makes his way out from Treasury building to Parliament, where he will present the budget as the country, of course, waits to hear what is in for them, Kenyans, in this reference to this budget. Nonetheless, our guest, Dr. David Kabata, I understand we have few minutes left with you on set. Nonetheless, is this Ukur Yatani's biggest headache? He smiles to the camera, but it seems as though that smile is beneath a headache.
Actually, as I said when I was starting, this is the most difficult time to read a budget. And basically, because of what we have been talking about here, the challenges that are there are immense. And the challenges is that we cannot be able to raise money to finance some of those projects that he's talking about, basically because of the challenge that we have, the COVID-19 challenge that has affected our country. So for me, he needs a lot of to do a lot of work, especially a lot of balancing. And he also needs to understand and to know that he needs to be think he will be looking.
Is it been difficult being Ukuru Yatani today, wearing his shoes if anyone was intending to?
Very difficult, very, very, very difficult. He needs to balance a lot, especially when it comes to this budget. We have people who have lost jobs. We have businesses that are collapsing. We have an economy that is in ICU already. It is hard. It is hard for him.
All right, a 2.7 trillion budget, of course, 1.8 trillion shillings will be spent on recurrent expenditure, 904 billion shillings set aside to pay debt obligations that are due. Of course, Daktari, before I let you go, as my final question, Kenya's appetite for dollar-denominated debt has been a topic of discussion as well. First, what is the understanding economic-wise of a dollar-denominated debt?
Actually, the dollar-denominated debts are some of those debts that you get, especially from the external market, the external market. And in most cases, we get them, especially when we have little money circulating in the economy. Actually, that is what happens, especially when we have a problem of inflation and all these things. So Kenyans are very eager in getting money from the external debt. And that is a challenge that actually some of those denominations are the ones that have brought about some of these challenges that we have here. We have talked about a situation where our external debt alone is at 3 trillion, and it is dollar denominated. That's 3 trillion.
And now, when that term is often used, it means this debt is in dollars, isn't it?
Yes, it is in dollars.
And as the fluctuations of currency continues, that debt can increase with time. Is it so?
Actually, that is what happens. It increases as our currency depreciates in value. So what usually happens is that we'll pay more than we had taken. And if we are in a situation as we are in this country, where the projects that we put the money are not able to give us enough money for repayment of those debts, then it becomes a big challenge for us.
And is there an option of foregoing dollar-denominated debts?
The best thing is to go for concessional loans, cheap loans. You can go for the dollar-denominated loans, but the cheap ones, not the commercial ones. I've just given you an example. We have commercial loans at 7%. We have concessional loans at 1.5%. So why do we have to go for dollar-denominated expensive loans when you can go for cheap loans?
Which begs the question, why should even the government in the first place go for loans that are expensive? Is there any sense into that?
As I said, one of the biggest challenges is the 2014. What happened in 2014 when we became a middle class economy? That took us away from getting what we call the low income loans, the concessional loans at very cheap prices. And that has been our challenge. Now, the challenge that we have right now is that if we go for the concessional loans, then what is going to happen is that the basing of our economy will go down. And I think that is what some of these key guys in the government are not willing to.
Even though in 2014 we were classified as a low middle class income country?
Yes. So if we go for those concessional loans, what is going to happen is that we are going to be downgraded. That is what I've said. And that is why you see some of these guys are...
And that downgrading means we'll be moved from the status where the country is now registered as though it is a low middle class income to what?
To maybe back to the low income economy. And that is what these guys do not want to to happen. So that is why you see, even when everybody is talking about restructuring the loan, we still the loans and also going for the concessional loans, we still have some tethering here and there.
And is there any significance of belonging to one of these brackets?
Yes, because when you are in a low economy, a low economy class, you can be able to get some of these low income loans from IMF and World Bank at a very cheap price. If it is not even at a very cheap interest rate, you can even get grants and also what we call moratorium of paying of maybe 25 years or something like that. So those are some of the advantages that we do not have when we base our economy at a higher level.
All right, as we conclude this discussion with you, Dr. David, what are your parting shots?
I think my parting shot is that we should live within our means as a country. We should think about the negotiation of the debt. We cannot be paying 1 trillion and collecting 1.6 trillion, as I said. We need to think about how we can lower the repayment of the debt. And I know if we restructure the debt or we reorganize some of those debts, what is going to happen is that we are going to save something to do with 100 billion every year, which is good money for us.
All right, renegotiating debts is a term that has been used lately and has been in the lips of many economists. You have also talked about it in this discussion more times than you have talked of any other thing. But what does that mean? These are agreements that have been signed. How do you renegotiate what you have already appended a signature on?
I'll give an example. Suppose, Abubakar, you take a loan of 1 million shillings and you decide to pay it in 6 months. And your payment per month is 300,000. And all of a sudden you realize that you cannot be able to repay it in 6 months. So you pull the repayment time to 6 years, where you'll be paying 70,000 or 60,000 per month. So those are some of the things that we are talking about.
Does that include an increase in interest on that loan?
Yes.
If you are expanding the time?
Yes, it will include. You will increase the interest rate, but you can be able to repay it. You can be able to repay it. So another one is trying to go for the cheap loans, come and repay the expensive loans, and you are left with the cheap loans. So that is what we are talking about the restructuring of the debt. So you can take the concessional loan at 1%, go and repay all the 9% interest rate or 5% interest rate loans, and you remain with the 1% interest rate. So those are the restructuring that we are talking about.
Dr. David Kabata, an economist, thank you for making time for us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me in your show.
All right, and as you can see clearly on your screens now, the CS is at Parliament. Of course, he gets out of the car there. Of course, the rituals and the traditions include a movement from Treasury Building, which he did earlier on, to Parliament now, where in front of lawmakers he will be reading the budget as the country watches. Remember, 25% of lawmakers are the ones who will be in the chamber of the National Assembly, hearing and listening to what the CS will put forth as a budgetary statement. Of course, this being a unique budget, a budget that is of 2.7 trillion shillings, in which 1.8 trillion shillings of that goes to recurrent expenditure. The government paying those who it needs to pay in as far as the staff who work for the government is concerned. There are no handshakes, as one would have supposed. It's a distant greeting at a time when the country and the entire globe is fighting COVID-19. Of course, a disease that can be spread by a handshake. Lawmakers are now getting to Parliament. We see cars there, of course. A clear indication that any minute from now, Parliament will be a beehive of activity. But amidst that, it will be silent as the country also mutes for an hour or so, in which the Treasury CS will be presenting the budget. Of course, the theme of this year's budget is harnessing the Big Four for job creation and economic prosperity. We discussed the theme earlier on at a time when 1.6 million Kenyans have lost their jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 42, subsection 2A, I rise to give the following statement on behalf of the House Business Committee, which met today, Thursday, June the 11th, 2020, at 9:30 a.m. to prioritize the business for consideration. On Tuesday next week, Mr. Speaker, we will consider the Committee of Supply on the budget estimates of recurrent and development expenditure for the year ending 30th June 2021 in both the morning and afternoon sitting. It is our hope that we should conclude the Committee of Supply by the end of the afternoon sitting on Tuesday so as to pave way for the publication of the Appropriation Bill 2020 that ends the budget cycle for 2020-2021. The Speaker, it's also anticipated that the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning will table its report on the Finance Bill 2020 on Tuesday, June the 16th, 2020, and thereafter prioritize the bill for second reading on Thursday, June 18, 2020. And it's important for members to note that both the Finance Bill 2020 and the Appropriation Bill 2020 ought to be passed and ready for assent by His Excellency the President by the 30th of June 2020 in accordance with the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 as amended by the House last year. And it's for this reason that the House Business Committee has given priority for these bills to be considered before the end of the month. Mr. Speaker, within the same week, the House Business Committee has also set to consider two bills. One, the mediated version of the County Government Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 11 of 2017, the mediated version of the County Government Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 7 of 2017, as well as the second reading of the Refugee Bill 2019 and the Committee of the Whole House of the T-Bill, Senate Bill number 36 of 2018. Honorable Speaker, finally, the House Business Committee will reconvene on Thursday, 18th June 2020 to consider business for the coming week. I now wish to lay this statement on the table of the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Very well. We proceed now with the motion by the Honorable Maore, but just to alert you that you will have, the motion has only a maximum of 8 minutes from now. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43(4) and Regulation 510 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund 2015, this House approves the list of nominees for the appointment to the following 17 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund laid on the table of this House on Thursday, June the 4th, 2020. 1. Bergut constituency, Bobazi constituency, Bomet Central constituency, Bumula constituency, Dagoretti North constituency, Galole constituency, Gem, Ijara, Isiolo North, Kabondo Kaspul, Kadui, Kiharu, Kilifi North, Ruiru, Samburu North, and Seme. Mr. Speaker, you will find that this is a lot that was presented on June the 4th, and we have been doing the approvals for the various constituency development boards, and we are behind the time we had sought for extension for the House to approve the boards that have been appointed or nominated by the various constituencies in the country. So, Mr. Speaker, it is not a complicated motion. The members that need to sit and approve the operations of those constituency development committees are needed urgently. And it is at this point, Mr. Speaker, I wish to state that we need these committees in place as quickly as possible so that those members or those constituencies can be able to utilize the funds that we are sending from Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, it is not, it's just like whereby the board has gone through the technical requirements for each and every member on different categories, and it is not complicated unless somebody from the floor can raise an objection to a specific constituency. Mr. Speaker, I would plead that this House does approve these 17 constituencies for the membership into those boards. And at this point, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and seek to have a member of the committee second the motion, the Chief Whip, and then we can continue.
Honorable
Yes,
Wangwe.
Honorable Wangwe has been a member of this committee.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to second the motion as moved by the chair and ascertained by the individual members from those constituencies, Honorable Speaker, who are also members of this House. Therefore, approving them will enable the various constituencies to enjoy the benefits that come along with the CDF from the various constituencies, Honorable Speaker. For that matter, I second.
Honourable members, I propose the question, which is that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43, subsection 4, and Regulation 5, subregulation 10 of the National Government Constituencies Development Fund 2015, this House approves the list of nominees for appointment to the following 17 constituency committees of the National Government Constituency Development Fund, laid to the table of the House on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. Constituencies being Belgut, Bobasi, Bomet Central, Bumula, Dagoretti North, Galole, Gem, Ijara, Isiolo North Constituency, Kabondo Kaspul, Kadui, Kiharu, Kilifi North, Mwingi Central, Ruiru, Samburu North, and Seme Constituency. Is the desire of the House that I put the question? Members, I put the question that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43, subsection 4 of the and Regulation 5, is the desire of the House that I put the question? Members, I put the question that pursuant to the provisions of Section 43, subsection 4 of the and Regulation 5, subregulation 10 of the National Government Constituency Development Fund 2015, this House approves the list of the nominees for appointment to the 17 constituencies named on the order paper, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, June 4th, 2020. Will as many as that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as the contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Just check if it's there. I can then make the communication. Yeah, I'm reading this one. Yeah, let them come in. Honourable members, I wish to interrupt the business. As you are aware, on Tuesday, 9th of June 2020, this House approved the report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on the budget estimates for the national government, the judiciary, and Parliament for the financial year 2020-2021. The next phase in the budget approval process will be consideration of the estimates in the Committee of Supply, which will allocate funds to various votes and programs of the Public Finance Management Act 2012, read together with our Standing Order 244C, require the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury to make a public pronouncement of the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures of the national government. It is for this reason that I will now interrupt the business of the House this afternoon, not later than 3 p.m., to allow the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning to discharge this obligation. However, honourable members, unlike the previous years and in keeping with the Speaker's guidelines on the conduct of plenary sittings during the COVID-19 pandemic period, issued on 2nd and 11th of April this year, you will note that today's event is unique, as the House is unable to accommodate the usual invited guests and other dignitaries to witness the event live from our galleries. We have a few exceptions, though. In this regard, I wish to recognize the few officials from the Ministry of National Treasury and Planning and other guests accompanying the Cabinet Secretary this afternoon. They are seated at the public servants' bench, the diplomatic boxes, and the Speaker's gallery. The officials include the Chief Administrative Secretary, National Treasury and Planning, the Honourable Nelson Gaishuye, the Principal Secretary, National Planning, Dr. Julius Muia, CBS, the Principal Secretary, National Treasury and Planning, Mr. Saitot Torome, the Principal Administrative Secretary, National Treasury and Planning, Mr. Amos Galesha, amongst other officials and the guests. You are welcome to the National Assembly this afternoon. Honourable members, Standing Order number 25A, paragraph A, provides that, and I quote, the Speaker may designate a suitable place in the chamber or at the bar of the House for the Cabinet Secretary responsible for finance to make a public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government as contemplated under the Public Finance Management Act, close the quotes. Honourable members, in furtherance of this provision, I have designated a suitable place to the right of the Speaker's seat and adjacent to the public servants' benches to enable the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury discharge his obligation under Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and our Standing Order 244C of the National Assembly Standing Orders. It's now my pleasure, therefore, to invite the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning, the Honourable Ambassador Ukur Yatan, to make a public pronouncement of the budget highlights and revenue-raising measures for the national government for the financial year 2020-2021 and the medium term. Cabinet Secretary, Karibu.
Mr. Speaker, honourable members and fellow Kenyans, it's a great honor to present to this August House and to the country the highlights of the budget for the financial year 2020-21. I do this in performing my fiduciary duty and fulfillment of the requirements of Section 40 of the Public Finance Management Act 2012 and the Standing Order number 241 of the National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, allow me to take this early opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency the President of the Republic of Kenya, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, for appointing me to the position of the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury and Planning to provide leadership in the economic and financial affairs of the country. Mr. Speaker, allow me also to express my deep appreciation to the Chair and members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, Finance and National Planning Committee, as well as the departmental committees of the National Assembly for their constructive engagement and support in the review of the financial year 2020-21 budget estimates and the financing measures. In February 2020, we submitted to this House the 2020 budget policy statement. During that time, our financial projections assumed a normal operating environment. The economy was projected to grow by 6.1% in 2020, which was an improvement from 5.4% in 2019. Indeed, we had set on a conscious journey of fiscal consolidation, targeting a lower fiscal deficit of 6.3% of GDP in the financial year 2019-2020, 4.9% of GDP in 2020-21, and ultimately 3.0% of GDP over the medium term. This plan was premised on a strong revenue growth, reduction of non-core expenditures, and a gradual slowdown in the growth of the public debt. Mr. Speaker, you may recall that early in the year, this House considered our proposals and approved the economic and financial strategies in the 2020 budget policy statement. Mr. Speaker, the global outbreak and the rapid spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has led to the contraction of the global economy with disastrous consequences. The pandemic and the attendant containment measures aimed at saving lives have disrupted the business environment, including international trade, leading to loss of livelihoods for millions of people globally. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has not been spared. Evidently, the pandemic and the swift containment measures, including the closure of the airspaces and borders, curfews and cessation of movements in some counties, among others, have not only disrupted our ways of lives and livelihoods, but to a great extent, business. These measures, including enforcement of basic hygiene and social distancing, were not only necessary but also timely, as they have indeed stemmed a surge of infections and loss of lives. In addition to the adverse effect of COVID-19 pandemic, our economy also experienced two other shocks. First, the massive invasion of swarms of desert locusts that damaged crops. Secondly, the floods that led to loss of lives and livelihoods, displacement of people, and destruction of infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, cognizant of the magnitude of the multiple challenges, particularly the COVID-19 pandemic, the government moved swiftly to intervene and implement a range of measures to mitigate against the adverse effects. Overall, these measures have provided the much-needed relief to the economy through injection of cash and provision of additional disposable incomes to the people and businesses. Mr. Speaker, the government also lowered the value-added tax rate from 16% to 14%, reduced tax rates from both corporate and personal income from 30% to 25%, and provided 100% tax relief for persons earning a gross monthly income of up to 24,000 Kenya shilling. Further, in order to support the micro, small, and medium enterprises, the turnover tax rate was lowered from 3% to 1%. Mr. Speaker, in order to support the economy, the government instituted various monetary policy measures to enhance credit access by the private sector at an affordable cost. This was achieved through introduction of central bank rates from 8.25% to 7%, and lowering of the cash reserve ratio requirement from 5.2% to 4.25%. Consequently, this intervention released Kenya shilling 35 billion to commercial banks, allowing them flexibility with regard to requirements for loan classification and disposition. Indeed, since March 2020, banks have restructured loans in excess of Kenya shilling 360 billion, including Kenya shilling 190 billion of personal loans. Further, Mr. Speaker, listing with the credit reference bureaus of any person, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and corporate entities whose loan account falls overdue or is in arrears was temporarily suspended. In addition, in order to enhance liquidity for business, the government provided Kenya shilling 13.1 billion to settle verified pending bills owed by ministries and departments, and a further Kenya shilling 10 billion for payment of verified VAT refund claims. Mr. Speaker, to cushion the vulnerable in our society, particularly the emerging urban vulnerable, the government provided an additional Kenya shilling 10 billion to boost the ongoing traditional current cash transfer program. Similarly, the government allocated Kenya shilling 1 billion to recruit health workers to strengthen the health capital capacity of the Ministry of Health, while allocating Kenya shilling 400 million for food and non-food commodities for affected households. Mr. Speaker, the government also established the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund to receive voluntary contributions from well-wishers towards defraying expenses associated with this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in order to gainfully engage our youth, the government rolled out the Kazi Mtaani program designed to improve public hygiene standards and undertake urban civil works. Already, 26,000 youth are engaged in the pilot phase. To further cushion citizens and business from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic and to stimulate economic activity going forward, His Excellency the President, on May 23, 2020, unveiled an 8-point economic stimulus program. I'll be elaborating on the economic stimulus program later in my statement. Mr. Speaker, over the last few months, revenue collections shrank considerably due to slowed economic activities attributed to COVID-19 pandemic. Conversely, there was a rise in public expenditures to address the targeted interventions. In light of this, the government reached out to the multilateral and bilateral development partners for additional funding. Indeed, the response from the development partners was prompt and also generous. A number of them provided assistance in form of grants and highly concessional funds and personal protective equipment. Mr. Speaker, allow me to highlight some of the significant financial assistance that Kenya has received from multilateral partners. First, the country received Kenya shilling 78.3 billion under the Rapid Credit Facility of the International Monetary Fund to help address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. This financial support is fully concessional at zero interest rate. Second, we received Kenya shilling 108 billion from the World Bank under the second development policy operation as both budgetary support and extra resources to help fight the pandemic. At the initial phase of the COVID-19 outbreak, the World Bank extended support of Kenya shilling 6.8 billion under the contingency emergency response to the Ministry of Health for prompt preparation and response. Mr. Speaker, the government has also received Kenya shilling 22.5 billion from the African Development Bank as a concessional loan, an additional Kenya shilling 7.5 billion commitments from the European Union in form of grants. With this support, Mr. Speaker, will not only strengthen our healthcare systems with the requisite equipment, supplies and medical personnel to respond to the pandemic, but also fund other critical interventions in the budget. We express our sincere gratitude to our bilateral development partners and multilateral institutions for standing with us during this challenging time. Mr. Speaker, the financial year 2020-21 budget responds to the current challenges facing Kenyans, businesses and the economy at large in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. It's in this context that we have chosen the theme for this budget as stimulating the economy to safeguard livelihoods, jobs, businesses, and industrial recovery. The theme underscores our determination to protect lives and livelihoods and cushion vulnerable citizens against the adverse effects of COVID-19. This is further expected to create and protect jobs, stimulate industrial growth, and ultimately steer economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, to sustain efforts towards the full recovery of the economy, the government is currently developing a post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy under the leadership of His Excellency the President. The strategy will not only accelerate economic recovery, but is designed to provide a roadmap for transition to a new development framework beyond the current Vision 2030. Mr. Speaker, allow me now to highlight the economic policy context in which this budget has been prepared. Mr. Speaker, in framing this budget, we have taken into account recent economic developments on the global and domestic scene. The budget was prepared against a background of a contracting global economy occasioned by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disrupted most aspects of human life. Indeed, most world economies remain on lockdown. As a result, in April 2020, the IMF projected that the world economy will experience negative growth rate of 3% in 2020. This is worse than the growth rate reported during the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis. However, on a positive note, world economic growth is projected to rebound to 5.8% in 2021. Mr. Speaker, overall, economic growth in advanced economies is projected to contract by 6.1% in 2020, while that of emerging and developing countries, including China, India, Russia, and Brazil, is expected to contract by 1% in 2020. Equally, economies in sub-Saharan Africa region are projected to contract by 1.6% in 2020 before a rebound to grow by 4.1% in 2021. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the adverse effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Kenyan economy is confronted by the impact of desert locusts and floods that have caused deaths, displacement, and destruction of infrastructure across the country. From these three simultaneous shocks, all sectors of the economy have been adversely affected. Agricultural sector, for example, has been hit hard by the low global demand for agricultural products, especially horticulture, tea, and coffee, among others. Further, the reduction in availability of raw materials and intermediate goods following closure of international borders has negatively affected the manufacturing sector. Mr. Speaker, taking into account the impact of these shocks on the domestic economy, growth is now projected at a lower rate of 2.5% in 2020, down from 5.4% growth recorded in 2019. Moving forward, so as to boost economic activities and foster higher growth rates, we shall not only implement a rapid economic stimulus program, but also lay down a firm post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy. These initiatives are ultimately expected to stimulate economic activities, thereby culminating to a growth of 5.8% in 2021 and 6.5% by 2024. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned earlier, our chosen fiscal consolidation plan has been adversely affected by the events over the last 6 months. In this respect, we are now targeting a fiscal deficit of 8.3% of GDP in financial year 2019-2020, from the previous target of 6.3% of GDP. In the financial year 2020-21, the fiscal deficit is targeted at 7.5% of GDP and is expected to improve to 6.1% of GDP in financial year 2022. Mr. Speaker, having outlined the economic policy context for this budget, the rest of my statement will outline specific measures aimed at stimulating the economy so as to safeguard livelihoods, including jobs, businesses, and facilitate faster industrial recovery. I will thereafter present a fiscal framework that sets out the resource envelope underpinning this budget and enumerate spending priorities. Finally, I'll provide highlights of tax and other policy measures that we are proposing to support economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, in addition to the recent shocks experienced by the economy, we are still confronted by the perennial challenges of high incidence of poverty and unemployment, frequent droughts, low agricultural and industrial productivity, inadequate decent housing, growing demand for high investment in the health sector, inadequate revenue, and other forms of financing and governance-related issues. Mr. Speaker, these challenges, including the devastating effects of COVID-19 pandemic, require bold actions if we are to position our country on a sustainable economic growth trajectory. Through this budget, therefore, Mr. Speaker, our focus will be, first, to roll out an economic stimulus program that will catalyze economic activity, provide livelihoods to Kenyans, and enable businesses to recover from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic. I will shortly enumerate the various initiatives under their funding. Second, maintaining macroeconomic stability to support long-term investments, economic growth, and development. Towards this end, we aim to strike an appropriate balance between support for economic recovery and continued fiscal discipline. This will be achieved through effective coordination of fiscal, monetary, and financial policies to lower the cost of living and doing business. Mr. Speaker, whereas Kenya's public debt remains sustainable, we need to be cautious about future debt accumulation. Our focus, therefore, will be to strengthen management of public debt to minimize costs and risk of the portfolio, while accessing external concessional funding to finance development projects. Further, Mr. Speaker, I reiterate that security of our people, property and investments remain key. In this regard, I'll be proposing allocation of funds to strengthen our security and investigative agencies. This is because a secure and conducive business environment will attract foreign direct investment that is necessary for economic recovery. Third, to support the recovery and growth of micro, small, and medium enterprises through various interventions, including operationalization of the Credit Guarantee Scheme. Mr. Speaker, to further expand opportunities for local enterprises and micro, small, and medium enterprises, we shall gazette and enforce the list of items for local procurement to promote the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya initiative. Fourth, to continue supporting implementation of the Big Four agenda. In this regard, therefore, Mr. Speaker, I will later in this statement be proposing allocations to the drivers and enablers of the Big Four agenda. Fifth, enhance allocation to support development of critical infrastructure in the country, such as roads, rail, energy, and water, among others, so as to reduce the cost of doing business as well as promote competitiveness. Sixth, increase resources to support the youth, women, and persons with disability to enable them actively contribute to economic recovery agenda. Seven, to scale up resource allocation to improve access to education, strengthen healthcare systems, and enhance cash transfers to support the vulnerable members of our society. Eighth, continue to facilitate county governments in strengthening their system to enhance service delivery. In this respect, I urge county governments which have not completed paying verified pending bills or to various suppliers to do so expeditiously. And ninth, implement various structural reforms to enhance the efficiency of public service delivery while at the same time ensuring accountability for sustained macroeconomic and fiscal stability, better credit ratings, improve fiscal discipline, and minimize corruption. Allow me at this point to elaborate on the 8-point economic stimulus program that the government will be implementing to stimulate and sustain economic activities. I will thereafter briefly highlight plans for developing the post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy, which is linked to the post-2030 vision. Mr. Speaker, the 8-point economic stimulus program targets to cushion vulnerable citizens and businesses, particularly those affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. The stimulus program will focus on keeping the food supply chains functional while promoting the use of locally produced goods and services, thus securing the livelihoods of daily wage earners. Mr. Speaker, we have set aside Kenya shilling 56.6 billion to cater for the various thematic areas of the program. Mr. Speaker, the first theme covers the infrastructure and is designed to rehabilitate road networks across the country as a direct response to the damages occasioned by the recent heavy rains. The rehabilitation of access roads and footbridges will optimize the use of local labor and materials, thereby generating short-term employment for thousands of youth. Towards this end, I propose to allocate Kenya shilling 5 billion for rehabilitation of the damaged access roads and footbridges. Further, Mr. Speaker, to address the issue of youth unemployment and empowerment in urban informal settlement, I have set aside Kenya shilling 10 billion under the Kazi Mtaani program. This Kazi Mtaani program will be targeting unemployed youth in the major cities and urban settlements of Nairobi, Mombasa, Kisumu, Eldoret, Nakuru, and other major towns across the country. The youth will be engaged in fumigation, stormwater drainage works, cleaning of markets and informal settlements, rehabilitation and maintenance of access roads, footbridges and footpaths, and other environmental management activities. The Kazi Mtaani program targets to employ at least 200,000 youth. Mr. Speaker, the second theme seeks to improve education outcomes in the country. The objective is to get thousands of unemployed teachers off the bench and into action as intern teachers, while also supporting local artisans and builders' businesses To meet this commitment, Kenya shilling 7.4 billion has been proposed. Mr. Speaker, out of these, Kenya shilling 2.1 billion will go to construction of additional classrooms in secondary schools. Kenya shilling 1.9 billion for provision of at least 250,000 locally fabricated desks for secondary and primary schools. Kenya shilling 700 million for capitation and improvement of infrastructure in low-cost boarding schools in arid and semi-arid lands using local labor. Kenya shilling 2.4 billion for recruitment of 10,000 intern teachers to support the 100% transition schools, and Kenya shilling 300 million for recruitment of 1,000 ICT interns to support digital learning in public schools. Mr. Speaker, the third theme targets to support micro, small, and medium enterprises. Despite their important contribution, these sectors continue to face challenges of accessing credit due to lack of sufficient collateral, high cost of credit, and informal business structure. These challenges have been worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. With the reduced turnover and disruptions in the market and supply chains, Mr. Speaker, in order to de-risk lending to the micro, small, and medium enterprise, I have set aside Kenya shilling 3 billion seed capital to operationalize the credit guarantee scheme. The scheme will enable the provision of affordable credit in an efficient and structured manner. In addition to this, we are also actively engaging a number of development agencies who have shown willingness to put in additional resources to support this scheme. Mr. Speaker, to further support and enhance the liquidity of these enterprises, I propose to fast-track payment of outstanding verified VAT refund claims and pending bills owed to businesses by allocating Kenya shilling 10 billion. This is in addition to the Kenya shilling 23.1 billion approved by this House in April 2020 in the supplementary budget for the same purpose. Mr. Speaker, the fourth theme prioritizes improvement in health outcomes. Evidently, the COVID-19 pandemic has overstretched our healthcare system. The government has made significant efforts to contain the spread of the virus through various protocols and containment measures, which entail promotion of hygiene and restriction of movements. Mr. Speaker, building on these measures in a way that ensures more Kenyans are gainfully engaged and support local industries, and to further enhance capacity of the healthcare system, Kenya shilling 1.2 billion is proposed for the recruitment of an additional cohort of 5,000 healthcare workers to support local health staff for a period of 1 year. This will enhance our COVID-19 response capabilities and strengthen implementation of the Universal Health Coverage Program. Mr. Speaker, we have also allocated an additional Kenya shilling 500 million to supply 20,000 locally made beds and bedding to public hospitals, and Kenya shilling 25 million to support the establishment of 50 modern walk-through sanitizers at our border points and main hospitals across the country. Mr. Speaker, the fifth theme will focus on agriculture and food security. I have set aside Kenya shilling 3 billion to subsidize the supply of farm inputs through the e-voucher system to reach 200,000 small-scale farmers. I have also allocated Kenya shilling 3.5 billion for expanded community household irrigation. These will caution farmers from the adverse effects of weather and further secure food supply chains. Further, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside Kenya shilling 1.5 billion to assist flower and horticultural farmers to access international market during this period when we are experiencing low cargo traffic in and out of the country. These interventions will support and sustain the farming communities as they will provide employment to thousands of workers in our agricultural sector. Mr. Speaker, the sixth theme for the program is to support the tourism sector. Tourism is one of the worst hit sectors by the pandemic. This is reflected by massive cancellation of hotel bookings occasioned by lockdown and travel bans imposed by various countries in an effort to minimize the spread of the virus. The resultant effect has been massive job and income losses by many Kenyans directly and indirectly employed in the tourism sector. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, to support this critical sector, the government has initiated a number of urgent measures, including a temporary lifting of the ban to hold meetings in private hotels by government agencies. The government has also waived landing and parking fees at our airports in order to facilitate movement of cargo in and out of Kenya. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, the government will scale up efforts to boost the tourism sector by promoting aggressive post-COVID-19 tourism marketing and providing support for hotel refurbishment through soft loans to be channeled through the Tourism Finance Corporation. Kenya shilling 3 billion has been set aside to support the renovation of facilities and the restructuring of business operations by actors in this industry. Mr. Speaker, the government will also provide grants to 160 community conservancies and support to Kenya Wildlife Services to engage 5,500 community scouts for a period of 1 year. To support these initiatives, I propose to set aside Kenya 2 billion in this budget. Mr. Speaker, the 7th theme seeks to improve environment, water and sanitation facilities, as well as mitigate the adverse effects of floods. On these, I have set aside Kenya 1 billion to support flood control using local labor in the most affected areas. I have also set aside Kenya 850 million to cater for rehabilitation of wells, water pumps and underground tanks in nasal areas using local labor, and Kenya 540 million to enhance tree planting program across the country using locally sourced seedlings. Mr. Speaker, the 8th and the final theme of the stimulus program is manufacturing. In this area, the government will promote the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya policy. To this end, we propose an initial investment of Kenya 600 million to purchase locally assembled vehicles. This will sustain the operation of local motor vehicle manufacturers, which is aimed at safeguarding jobs. Mr. Speaker, I further propose an allocation of Kenya 712 million to provide credit targeted to micro, small and medium enterprises in the manufacturing sector. Mr. Speaker, in addition to implementing the economic stimulus program that I have enumerated, the government is formulating a post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy to mitigate the adverse impacts on the economy and further reposition the economy on a steady and sustainable growth trajectory. Mr. Speaker, the post-COVID economic recovery strategy will focus on the following. 1. Sound macroeconomic policy framework to support a higher sustainable economic growth that will address the challenges of poverty, unemployment, and income inequality. 2. Adequate local and foreign resource mobilization to ensure sustainable funding of our development programs. 3. Enhancing the role of the private sector in the economy, including financing infrastructure projects from diverse sources such as public-private partnership and lease financing. 4. Supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises by facilitating access to adequate finances through credit guarantee scheme. 5. Full and timely implementation of the economic stimulus program, which will create jobs and stimulate business. 6. Investment in the ICT and digital infrastructure to support the use of digital platforms to facilitate e-commerce and efficient delivery of public services. 7. Promotion of local production of processes and domestic supply value chains. 8. Enhancement of disaster risk management systems. 9. Improvement of social protection through targeted policy interventions and programs. And 10. Strengthening monitoring and evaluation systems for quality outcomes of the project. Mr. Speaker, in preparing the post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy, we will ensure the process is all-inclusive. To this end, we'll draw inputs and ideas from diverse groups, including experts from both county and national government, private sector, development partners, academia, and research institutions, and other relevant stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, it's also important to note that we are less than 10 years to the end of our long-term development blueprint, the Kenya Vision 2030. As we conclude this implementation, we need to think of the next development framework for this country. In this respect, Mr. Speaker, the preparation of the next long-term development plan will benefit from this post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy. The new plan, beyond the Kenya Vision 2030, will take cognizance of the transition of sustainable development goals of United Nations and the African Union Agenda 2063. This will be a precursor to 100 years of Kenya's independence celebration. Mr. Speaker, to improve the business environment, increase efficiency in public service delivery, and enhance accountability and transparency in our conduct of business, I propose the following structural reforms. Mr. Speaker, since enactment, the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act 2015 has been operating without the supporting regulations. However, I am pleased to report that the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Regulations 2020 have been published and are awaiting parliamentary approval. These regulations seek to enhance uniformity of operations across the procuring entities and promote the local economy through affirmative interventions on preferences and reservations. On e-procurement, Mr. Speaker, the government has finalized the e-government procurement strategy. According to this strategy, the government will procure and roll out an end-to-end e-procurement system by end of December 2020. Under the e-procurement system, all procurement processes will be undertaken on an online platform where benefits will accrue to the government procuring entities in terms of cost reduction, speed, transparency, accountability, and visibility. Mr. Speaker, in order to ensure the growth and sustainability of enterprises owned by women, youth, and persons living with disability, the National Treasury has re-engineered the access to government procurement opportunities portal to enable real-time registration and transparent monitoring of the implementation of the scheme. The system has also been linked to other government institutions, including Kenya Revenue Authority, National Council for Persons with Disability, Registrar of Companies, and IFMIS to facilitate faster verification and reporting. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the National Treasury has directed all procuring entities to ensure prompt payment for all contracts performed by these target groups. Mr. Speaker, allow me to focus my attention on the construction industry, where I believe we can create the much-needed jobs for the youth by hiring local contractors. The government is aware that local contractors in general have had challenges of undertaking infrastructure projects due to limited technical, financial, and managerial capacities. This has resulted in participation of more foreign contractors in local contracts at the expense of local contractors. In this respect, the government will review the contracting framework for infrastructure projects in the country with a view of ensuring participation of local contractors in local contracts. These will retain domestic revenues within the country and create jobs for the youth contractors. Mr. Speaker, the restriction placed on businesses and services as a result of COVID-19 pandemic have had significant adverse effects on the performance of strategic state-owned enterprises offering essential services. Given the contingent liabilities that may arise thereof, I have constituted a technical team at the National Treasury and Planning to review the challenges facing state-owned enterprises and recommend remedial actions within 90 days. On pending bills, Mr. Speaker, we have noted that several state corporations and semi-autonomous agencies hold significant amounts of pending bills owed to contractors, suppliers, SACCO remittances, and other statutory deductions. This practice should not be allowed to continue. Mr. Speaker, following a Cabinet directive, the National Treasury constituted a pending bills multi-agency team to deal with the existing historical and contested pending bills. Significant progress has been made to settle some of the pending bills. I direct all principal secretaries and accounting officers to clear all pending bills in the MDAs and SAGAs, respectively. Further, Mr. Speaker, going forward, the National Treasury may withhold exchequer releases to the MDAs or SAGAs with pending bills until an approved payment plan for all pending bills is agreed upon. Mr. Speaker, the continued growth and competitiveness of our financial services sector is critical in supporting economic development. I wish to state that our financial sector remains strong and stable despite the shocks occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Speaker, the banking sector remains stable and resilient, with strong liquidity and capital adequacy ratios. The Central Bank of Kenya has been closely monitoring the sector to identify vulnerabilities, especially those associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. The bank has been at the forefront and has rolled out various policy and regulatory measures to support the sector. Mr. Speaker, during the last 1 year, the government, through Central Bank of Kenya, rolled out a mobile-based service to facilitate retail investors participate in government securities, a convenience to investors during this pandemic. Mr. Speaker, in order to strengthen our position as regional financial hub, the National Treasury is in the process of operationalizing the Nairobi International Financial Center. The center will play an important role in attracting investments and private capital to support economic growth, as well as mobilizing additional financing for the Big Four project and further providing new financing options for Kenyan businesses. Mr. Speaker, to enhance the safety and integrity of our financial system, the National Treasury, together with other stakeholders, will conduct Kenya's first national risk assessment on money laundering and terrorism financing. This will assist the country's competent authorities to assign responsibilities for combating money laundering and terrorism financing to the relevant government agencies on the basis of identified risks and vulnerabilities. Mr. Speaker, the high cost of housing units and limited access to affordable long-term finance remain a leading house market constraint. To address this challenge, the government established the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company, whose main purpose is to provide long-term funds to primary housing mortgage providers in the housing sector. In this regard, the company will offer fixed-rate long-term loans at concessional rates to mortgage providers who are expected to pass the benefit to citizens at a lower than market rates. The company has raised capital of Shilling 2 billion, while the National Treasury has mobilized additional Shilling 35 billion from development partners to support the company's operations. Mr. Speaker, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company will help to maintain adequate liquidity among primary housing mortgage providers in order to keep housing finance and the housing market functioning. This will avert potential credit crunch that will hurt lower-income households and interrupt efforts to support affordable housing. Mr. Speaker, the new company is also expected to play a significant role in the structuring of the proposed National Credit Guarantee Scheme in order to create an effective backstop mortgage guarantee component to cover the losses incurred by the lenders on future home loans. Mr. Speaker, in the year 2015, the investment guidelines under the retirement benefits regulations were amended to allow pension schemes to invest up to 10% of their assets in private equity funds and venture capital funds licensed by the Capital Markets Authority. However, the Capital Markets Act was not amended to provide for regulations of this private equity and the venture capital. In this regard, I have proposed amendment to the Capital Markets Act to provide for the regulation of private equity and venture capital companies by the authority. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I propose to amend the Capital Markets Act to remove the function of payment of beneficiaries from collected and claimed dividends, since these are functions currently domiciled and an unclaimed financial assets authority. Mr. Speaker, the increase in public pension budget and accumulation of pension claims remain a challenge. In this regard, the National Treasury is re-engineering and upgrading the pension systems in order to clear all pension payments backlogged by the end of the calendar year. This will pave way for modernized pension management system that will guarantee smooth transition of retirees from a monthly salary check to a monthly pension payment. To ease the pension burden on the exchequer, the National Treasury is committed to roll out the Public Service Superannuation Scheme in the financial year 2020-21. Further, Mr. Speaker, to support the pension sector in general, the government is developing a national retirement benefits policy that will harmonize all pension laws. This will strengthen the legal and regulatory framework to achieve a comprehensive pension coverage across the formal and informal sectors and better protect the interests of beneficiaries and rights of pension contributors. Mr. Speaker, in September 2019, this House approved the County Government Retirement Scheme, which provides for the establishment of an umbrella retirement scheme for county government. Thereafter, petitions were filed in courts challenging the law, thus paralyzing its operation. To this effect, the National Treasury undertakes to pursue all legal means to resolve this matter and ensure that county government employees have a scheme that safeguards members' pensions. Mr. Speaker, further, the government is working on establishing a national micro-pension scheme with a sustainable model that combines long-term saving with short-term needs that will be open to all marginalized informal workers who constitute over 80% of Kenya's labor force. Mr. Speaker, the Retirement Benefits Authority Act does not provide for sanction in case of failure or delay in submission of the actuarial valuation reports within the specified period. In this regard, I propose to amend the Retirement Benefits Authority Act to impose a penalty to pension scheme who fail to submit actuarial valuation reports to the authority within the specified timeline. The actuarial valuation reports are important in determining the performance of the scheme. Mr. Speaker, framework for responding to disasters in Kenya are fragmented across laws. This has hampered the ability of governments to respond to disasters more effectively. To address this challenge, the government will develop a harmonized disaster risk management legal framework to guide the management of disasters in Kenya. To this end, we shall also finalize the Disaster Management Fund regulations to facilitate effective and efficient response to disasters in a more coordinated manner. Mr. Speaker, globally, climate change is a key concern, like other countries. The Kenyan economy is vulnerable to its effects. Over the last 10 years, we have experienced increased frequency and intensity of extreme weather. Mr. Speaker, in order to minimize the adverse effects of this phenomenon on the economy, we need to pursue a green economic development path. In this regard, the National Treasury proposed to tap into the green climate financing by issuing the first sovereign green bond to finance major infrastructure projects in the financial 2020-21. These proceeds will be directed towards green projects at both the national and county level. Mr. Speaker, execution of the budget for 2019-2020 has progressed well despite the challenges of reduced revenue performance. The COVID-19 pandemic has not only worsened revenue performance in 2019-2020, but will affect revenue in 2020-21 budget. In particular, import-related taxes such as import duty, VAT on imports, import declaration fees, and rural development levy have been negatively affected due to lower imports and reduction of trade among countries. Further, other domestic taxes have been severely affected by declining incomes and depressed consumptions. As noted earlier in my statement, in order to cushion Kenyans against the adverse impact of the pandemic and to further increase liquidity in the economy, the government lowered tax rates for corporate and personal incomes, turnover tax, value-added tax, and provided tax relief to low-income earners and employees. These measures are estimated to cost the Exchequer Kenya 172 billion in revenue foregone by government in one financial year. Mr. Speaker, in order to recoup part of this revenue loss, we submitted this House proposals to lower the level of tax exemptions. It is important to note that in the year 2018, the tax revenue foregone by government through tax incentives, or for that matter exemptions, amounted to Kenya shilling 535 billion, or 6% of GDP, which is considered one of the highest levels globally. Whereas these tax incentives are well intended, they have limited the capacity of government to fund critical expenditures. In addition, a critical review of the incentive shows that consumers have not benefited through commensurate reduction in cost of the goods and services. Further, some of these incentives have given undue advantage to some sector players over others, thus entrenching unfairness and stifling competition. Mr. Speaker, this therefore necessitated a review of the existing laws incentive regime with a view to minimizing distortions and providing a level playing ground for all taxpayers. In this respect, I have proposed further removal of some existing tax exemptions through the Finance Bill 2020. I urge honorable members of this House to support this endeavor that is expected to grow revenues for funding critical social and infrastructure programs. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Revenue Authority has undertaken various reforms to enhance revenue mobilization. We shall continue to support and strengthen the capacity of the Kenya Revenue Authority to enable them collect revenues to fund government programs. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal framework for 2020-21 budget and the medium term has been revised to take into account the adverse impacts of the pandemic on revenue performance. In this respect, the 2020-21 budget targets revenue collection, including appropriation in aid, of Kenya shilling 1.89 trillion, which is equivalent to 16.8% of GDP. This is a stagnation from the estimated revenues of Kenya shilling 1.89 trillion, equivalent to 18.6% of GDP in the financial year 2019-2020. Of these, ordinary revenues in the financial year 2020-21 are projected at Kenya shilling 1.63 trillion, equivalent to 14.5% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, total expenditures in the financial year 2020-21 are projected at Kenya shilling 2.79 trillion, or 24.7% of GDP, from the estimated levels of Kenya shilling 2.77 trillion, or 27.2% of GDP in 2019-2020. The recurrent expenditures in the financial year 2020-21 will amount to Kenya shilling 1.82 trillion, or 16.2% of GDP. On the other hand, ministerial development expenditures that include foreign finance projects, allocation to contingency funds, and conditional capital transfers to the county government are projected at Kenya shilling 633.1 billion in 2020-21. This will enhance critical infrastructure in the budget. Mr. Speaker, taking into account the projected revenues and expenditure in the financial year 2020-21, the fiscal deficit, including grants, is projected to decline to Kenya shilling 840.6 billion, or 7.5% of GDP, from Kenya shilling 842.7 billion, or 8.3% of GDP in the financial 2019-2020. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, as we roll out the post-COVID-19 economic recovery strategy, we remain committed to gradually lowering the fiscal deficit to Kenya shilling 768.8 billion, or 6.1% of GDP in the financial year 2021-22, and further to Kenya shilling 570.4 billion, or 3.6% of GDP by 2023-24. In the financial year 2020-21, the fiscal deficit of Kenya shilling 840.6 billion will be financed through net external financing of Kenya shilling 347 billion, or 3.1% of GDP, net financing of Kenya shilling 493.4 billion, or 4.4% of GDP, and other net domestic repayment of Kenya shilling 627 million. Mr. Speaker, to achieve these targets, we will continue to contain growth in non-core recurrent spending and enhance our efforts in revenue mobilization. In this respect, we shall closely monitor the economic impact of COVID-19, and once the economy recovers, we'll review our fiscal plan, including tax measures, to strengthen public finances to sustainably fund our development agenda. Mr. Speaker, the government is concerned about perennial low absorption of donor funds that has denied Kenyans the full benefit of this financing. To remove impediments in the project's implementation and scale up absorption of donor funds, the government will put in place appropriate policies and administrative measures. These may involve reallocation of funds from slow-moving projects or non-startup projects to other priority projects and programs to minimize payments of unnecessary fees and charges. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the state of our public debt. Our debt remains sustainable despite some of the debt burden indicators deteriorating due to impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has elevated expenditure pressures, reduced revenues, and export earnings. The debt burden is projected to decline over the medium term in line with the fiscal consolidation plan and implementation. Going forward, Mr. Speaker, the government is committed to implement the 2020 medium-term debt strategy, which recommends a shift towards concessional external borrowing and lengthening of maturity structure of the domestic debt. In addition, the debt and borrowing policy approved in early 2020 will guide management of public debt. Mr. Speaker, as an alternative source of finance to fund public projects, the government shall revitalize the public-private partnership framework. Indeed, public-private partnerships have the potential to accelerate economic growth and development by crowding in private sector participation in the financing of capital-intensive infrastructure projects. Mr. Speaker, the reforms in this area will include amending the PPP Act to remove unnecessary approvals and redundant processes, as well as restructure and strengthen institutions responsible for implementing such projects. The government will also streamline and standardize the appropriate credit enhancement tool, including the government letter of support, partial risk guarantees, and indemnity guarantees, as well as viability gap funding where necessary, to enhance bankability of projects. Mr. Speaker, the government, through these arrangements, targets to mobilize approximately $200 billion in the financial year 2020-21 by concluding the financing of several projects that are currently at advanced stage of negotiation. These projects are drawn from, among others, the transport, energy, health, housing, and manufacturing sectors of the economy. Mr. Speaker, let me turn to the highlights of the government spending priorities in the coming financial year. The total program spending for the financial 2020-21, excluding redemptions, amounts to shilling 2.79 trillion. Mr. Speaker, the budget for financial 2020-21 will continue the implementation of the Big Four agenda. Thus, the targeted expenditures prioritize employment creation, youth empowerment, supporting manufacturing activities, enhancing health coverage, improving food security, and living conditions through affordable housing. To support these initiatives, I have set aside shilling 128.3 billion for the Big Four agenda drivers and enablers. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to prioritize healthcare by scaling up universal health coverage to all the counties. To improve health outcomes, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 111.7 billion to the health sector in this budget. Out of this, shilling 50.3 billion is for activities and programs for the attainment of universal health coverage by the drivers and enablers. Mr. Speaker, the budget for the health sector includes shilling 19.2 billion to address and lower cases of HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis in the country. Shilling 6.2 billion for the managed service equipment. Shilling 5.3 billion to transform the healthcare systems for universal health coverage. Shilling 4.1 billion to cater for free maternity health care. And shilling 1.8 billion to provide medical cover for the elderly and severely disabled in our society. Mr. Speaker, other allocations to improve health service delivery includes shilling 15 billion for Kenyatta National Hospital, shilling 10 billion for the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, shilling 7.2 billion for Kenya Medical Training Centers, shilling 2.5 billion for the Kenya Medical Research Institute, shilling 1.2 billion to Madari Hospital, and shilling 4.3 billion as a conditional grant to level 5 hospitals in the counties. Mr. Speaker, to ensure the success of affordable housing program, the government continues to forge partnerships with the private sector and development partners. In this budget, I have proposed an allocation of shilling 15.5 billion to the housing, urban development, and public works sector. Out of these, shilling 6.9 billion will cater for the affordable housing program undertaken by the driver and enablers. We are also concluding discussions to bring on board an additional shilling 3.6 billion from the African Development Bank, shilling 7.5 billion for the Kenya Urban Program, and shilling 1.1 billion for the ongoing construction of Gikomba, Githurai, Chaka, Kamkunji, and Agoreti markets. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to scale up reforms to promote investment in the manufacturing sector to support and protect local industries. To promote local industries, I have proposed an allocation of Kenya shilling 18.3 billion for this cluster. Of this, Kenya shilling 1.4 billion will go to the Kenya Industrial Entrepreneurship Project, Kenya shilling 3.5 billion for the development of Special Economic Zone, Textile Park in Naivasha, Kenanie Leather Industrial Park, and at the River Textile Hub. In addition, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside Kenya shilling 843 million to support modernization of Rivertex, Kenya shilling 800 million for the development of various micro, small and medium enterprises in Kenya, Kenya shilling 715 million for the Kenya Youth Empowerment and Opportunities Project, Kenya shilling 500 million to support the dairy processing, and Kenya shilling 3 billion for the Ongokundu Special Economic Zone. Mr. Speaker, the government remains committed to reducing the number of food insecure Kenyans. Towards this end, the government will continue to expand irrigation schemes, support large-scale production of staples, increase access to agricultural inputs, implement programs to support smallholder farmers, and promote the use of appropriate farming techniques. Mr. Speaker, to support these initiatives, I have set aside shilling 52.8 billion for food and nutritional security. Out of this, shilling 10.6 billion has been proposed for the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, shilling 5.5 billion for the National Agricultural and Rural Inclusivity Project, shilling 4.1 billion for the Kenya Cereal Enhancement Program, shilling 730 million for the Food Security and Crop Diversification Project, and shilling 10 billion for irrigation land reclamation. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations include shilling 1.8 billion to enhance aquaculture business development project, shilling 1.4 billion to support small-scale irrigation and value addition, shilling 1.3 billion to enhance resilience of pastoral communities, shilling 1.1 billion to enhance drought resilience and sustainable livelihood, shilling 1.6 billion to support processing and registration of title deeds, and shilling 500 million to advance agricultural loans through Agricultural Finance Corporation. Mr. Speaker, allow me to turn to other proposed expenditures that are critical in this budget. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to scale up the construction of a robust network of high-quality roads, railways, sea, and airports to enable Kenyans to enjoy the benefits of expanded infrastructure assets and improve our competitiveness. Towards this end, I propose an allocation of shilling 172.4 billion. This is in addition to allocation that I have already set aside for the Economic Stimulus Program and the Big Four agenda, which support construction of roads and bridges, as well as their rehabilitation and maintenance. Mr. Speaker, I have set aside shilling 18.1 billion for SGR Phase 2, shilling 6 billion for the LAPSET project, shilling 5 billion for the Mombasa Port Development Project, and shilling 328 million for the insurance of ferries for the Likoni Channel. Mr. Speaker, to support generation of adequate and affordable energy, I have set aside shilling 63.3 billion, excluding the allocation for the Big Four agenda. Out of this, shilling 50.8 billion will cater for transmission and distribution of power, shilling 9.3 billion for development of geothermal energy, shilling 6.8 billion for electrification of public institutions, and shilling 900 million for provision of transformers in constituencies, development of nuclear energy, and exploration and mining of coal. Mr. Speaker, ensuring a safe and secure environment is vital in our drive to attain economic transformation. Towards this end, government will strengthen the security agencies by equipping them in order to increase their effectiveness and rapid response to incidents of crime. Mr. Speaker, to support security operations in the country, I have proposed shilling 167.9 billion in this budget to our security agencies, defense and national intelligence services, leasing of police motor vehicles, national communication and surveillance system, police modernization, and the equipping of the National Forensic Laboratory. Mr. Speaker, I have also set aside shilling 3.4 billion for medical insurance, shilling 2.2 billion for group personal insurance for the National Police and Prison Services, and shilling 1 billion for the National Integrated Identity Management Systems. Mr. Speaker, The government continues to make sustained investments in the education sector in order to enhance access to quality basic and higher education. In this budget, I have set aside shilling 497.7 billion to fund programs in this sector. This accounts for 26.7% of the budget. Specifically, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed shilling 59.4 billion to cater for free day secondary education program and shilling 12.4 billion for free primary education program. Mr. Speaker, to increase the teacher to student ratio, I have proposed shilling 2 billion for the recruitment of 5,000 teachers. This is further to the provision for hiring at least 10,000 teachers in terms under the economic stimulus program. To improve health conditions and support education, achievement of our school-going children, I have set aside shilling 1.8 billion for the school feeding program. Mr. Speaker, other proposed allocations to the education sector includes shilling 6.3 billion for the construction and equipping of technical institutions and vocational training centers, shilling 4 billion for examination fees waiver for all Class 8 and Form 4 candidates, shilling 800 million for the digital literacy program and competency-based curriculum, shilling 323 million for the National Research Fund, shilling 94.9 billion to support university education, and shilling 16.8 billion to the Higher Education Loans Board. Mr. Speaker, as a government that deeply cares for its most vulnerable members of society, I have proposed shilling 17.6 billion for cash transfers to the elderly persons, shilling 7.9 billion for orphans and vulnerable children, and shilling 1.1 billion for cash transfer to persons with severe disabilities. Mr. Speaker, I have also set aside shilling 4.3 billion for the Kenya Hunger Safety Net Program, shilling 2.5 billion for the Kenya Social and Economic Inclusion Project, shilling 3.5 billion for Kenya Development Response to the Displacement Impact Project, and shilling 400 million for the National Development Fund for persons with disabilities, and a further shilling 720 million for purchase of a building for these vulnerable members of our society. Mr. Speaker, to enhance equity and reduce poverty, I have proposed shilling 41.7 billion for the National Government Constituency Development Fund, shilling 2.1 billion for the National Government Affirmative Action Fund to promote regional equity and social development, and shilling 6.8 billion for the Equalization Fund to finance programs in marginalized areas. Mr. Speaker, to address the challenges that our youth continues to face, we have dedicated resources to youth empowerment programs and supporting businesses by youth, women, and persons living with disabilities. In this regard, I have set aside shilling 10.2 billion to the National Youth Service, shilling 2.1 billion for the Kenya Youth Empowerment Program, shilling 359 million to the Youth Enterprise Development Fund, shilling 82 million to the Youth Employment and Enterprise WEZO, and shilling 150 million to the Women Enterprise Fund. Mr. Speaker, our prosperity as a country is to a larger extent hinged on our ability to take full advantage of the rapid technological advances. For this reason, Mr. Speaker, the government continues to invest in this area to boost digital literacy and skills, as well as expand digital infrastructure to improve access to affordable broadband connectivity. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, I have proposed shilling 14.9 billion to fund initiatives in the information communication technology sector. Specifically, shilling 700 million for the government shared services, shilling 800 million for the digital literacy program, and shilling 1.2 billion for rehabilitation of national optic fiber backbone phase 2 expansion cable. Mr. Speaker, the government is fast-tracking the establishment of the Konza Technopolis City, which will position Kenya as a world-class IT. For this reason, I have enhanced allocation to the project by setting aside shilling 6.3 billion for the horizontal infrastructure phase 1 for Konza, shilling 400 million for the ongoing construction of Konza Technopolis Complex phase 1B, and shilling 5.1 billion for for Konza Data Center and its Smart City Facilities project. Mr. Speaker, sports, culture, tourism, and arts contribute immensely to our economic development by boosting job creation for our youth and generating foreign exchange. To support this sector, I propose an allocation of shilling 14 billion to the Sports, Arts and Social Development Fund. I have also set aside shilling 2.5 billion for the Tourism Promotion Fund and shilling 3.8 billion for the Tourism Fund. Mr. Speaker, the government continues to invest in clean water supply and put in place measures to control floods and harvest rainwater, as well as protect the environment. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside shilling 82.7 billion to support environment and water conservation. In particular, shilling 42.6 billion is geared towards the development of water and sewerage infrastructure. Shilling 10.9 billion for the management of water resources, and shilling 8.6 billion to support water storage and flood control. This includes shilling 500 million earmarked for the initial works for the construction of Kurusoin Dam along River Nyando, and shilling 1.3 billion for water harvesting and storage for irrigation. Mr. Speaker, I have also set aside shilling 10.9 billion to support conservation of forests and water towers. Shilling 10 billion for irrigation and land reclamation, shilling 10.8 billion for wildlife conservation and management, shilling 2.7 billion for environmental management and protection, and shilling 1.6 billion for meteorological services. This allocation excludes the provision under the Economic Stimulus Program and the B4 agenda. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government will implement the Kenya Financing Locally Led Climate Action Program to deliver climate finance at the local level where its impacts are felt most. To start off the project, I have proposed to allocate shilling 100 million in the financial 2020-21. Mr. Speaker, to sustain the drive against corruption, instill good governance practices, and recover corruptly acquired assets, I have enhanced allocation to the institutions mandated to fight corruption. In particular, Mr. Speaker, I have set aside shilling 3.1 billion for the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission and a similar amount for the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Shilling 149 million for the Unclaimed Financial Assets Authority, shilling 158 million for Asset Recovery Agency, shilling 619.1 million for the Financing Reporting Center, shilling 7.9 billion for the Criminal Investigation Agencies, and shilling 5.2 billion for the Office of the Auditor General. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, to support the oversight and legislative role of Parliament and access to justice, I have proposed shilling 37.3 billion to Parliament and shilling 18.1 billion to the judiciary. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2020-21, county governments have been allocated shilling 369.9 billion, which comprises 1. Shilling 316.5 billion as equitable share, shilling 13.7 billion as additional conditional allocation from the national government, shilling 30.2 billion being external loans and grants, and shilling 9.4 billion from the Roads Maintenance Levy Fund. Mr. Speaker, in February 2020, the national government and the Nairobi City County government entered into an agreement through which the county transferred some functions to the national government. To manage the transferred functions, the national government established the Nairobi Metropolitan Services. In order to facilitate performance of the transferred functions, the Nairobi Metropolitan Services has been allocated shilling 26.4 billion in the financial 2020-21, which includes shilling 15.95 billion from the Nairobi County's equitable revenue share for the financial 2020-21, and shilling 660 million as additional conditional allocations related to the transferred functions. The balance of shilling 9.78 billion will come from the county's local revenue. The NMS has also been allocated shilling 1.5 billion from the national government's equitable revenue share to finance the Mukuru Renewal Project. Mr. Speaker, further to the Presidential Directive of February 2019, the National Treasury, jointly with other stakeholders, has finalized the development of an integrated development management system for county government. The system, which is aimed at eliminating leakages and high revenue collection costs of the county, is expected to be in place by the end of the financial year 2020-21. Mr. Speaker, I'm aware that the County Government's Revenue Raising Process Bill 2018, which was sponsored by the National Treasury, has recently elapsed. In this context, I have resubmitted the draft bill to the Attorney General so that it may be reintroduced in Parliament. The principle underlying the proposed legislation is that counties may not impose, vary, or waive a tax, fee, or any other charge in a way that materially and unreasonably prejudices national economic policies, economic activities across county boundaries, and the national mobility of goods, services, capital, or labor. I appeal to honourable members to reconsider the merits of this proposed legislation, which was developed through widely consultative approach that incorporated all key actors, including institutions of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, in line with the Presidential Directive on the settlement of pending bills, Kenyan shillings 36.7 billion, representing 71.5% of the total eligible bills verified by the Auditor General, has been settled by the county government as at May 2020. I urge county government to clear outstanding bills by 30th of June 2020 and ensure no further build-up of expenditure arrears. Mr. Speaker, in the financial year 2020-21, beneficiary counties have been allocated $6.8 billion under the Equalization Fund. I am aware that there are disbursement arrears, and I wish to give an assurance that future allocations will be enhanced to make up for the shortfalls. Mr. Speaker, in a High Court ruling of November 2019, the guidelines on administration of Equalization Fund were declared unconstitutional, null and void. Effectively, the Fund's Advisory Board was disbanded and all operations halted, including payments for ongoing projects. The ruling directed that the National Treasury to develop a new Equalization Fund statutory instrument. In compliance with the ruling, a new draft statutory instrument for the fund has been developed and is ready for gazettement and tabling before Parliament. I am also aware, Mr. Speaker, the existence of a 2019 private members' bill on the Equalization Fund, which was passed by the National Assembly and is currently before the Senate. In this context, I wish to propose honourable members to initiate a process to harmonise efforts to achieve sustainable administration of this fund. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution requires the 2/3 levels of government to conduct their mutual relations based on consultation and considerations, and to respect the functional and institutional integrity of government at other levels. The objective is to achieve whole government approach to provide synergies and common sense delivery solutions. Mr. Speaker, towards this end, the government will leverage on the intergovernmental framework for the implementation of national government programs and projects at counties formulated in 2019 to harmonize implementation of plans such as the Big Four development agenda, as well as policies between the two levels of government, including planning and budgeting. This is part of efforts to achieve an all-government approach to development. Mr. Speaker, the rest of my statement is on tax measures for the financial 2020-21 budget contained in the Finance Bill 2020, which I submitted to this House in April 2020, in line with the requirements of the Public Finance Management Act 2012. Further, I will highlight measures on cushion duty as agreed at the regional level during the East African Community Pre-Budget Consultation meeting for the financial year 2020-21. These measures are expected to generate about shilling 38.9 billion in tax revenue to the Exchequer. Mr. Speaker, manufacturing is a major pillar in the Big Four agenda, where the government aims to increase the contribution of the sector to GDP from about 8% to 15% by 2022. In this regard, I have proposed at the regional level measures aimed at promoting local manufacturing and also measures to ensure that locally manufactured products are competitive. Mr. Speaker, the customs measures that have been agreed upon at the regional level shall, in accordance with the East African Community practice, be effective from 1st July 2020. I wish to highlight a few of the measures that have direct impact on Kenya manufacturers. Mr. Speaker, our metal and allied sector continues to face stiff competition from imported iron and steel products. In order to protect the sector, the rate of import duty of 35% with the corresponding specific rates on a wide range of these products have been maintained for another year. Kenya has sufficient capacity to produce paper and paperboard products. In order to protect manufacturers of these products from cheap imported products, we have maintained the import duty rate at 25% for another 1 year. Mr. Speaker, Kenya has capacity to manufacture baby diapers. However, the imports used in manufacturing these products attract import duty. In order to support manufacturing of the products locally, all inputs for manufacturing of baby diapers will be imported duty-free under the South African Community Duty Remission Scheme. In addition, to promote local production of new clothing and apparels, including fashion and design, imports used in the textile and apparel sector will be imported duty-free under the scheme. Mr. Speaker, the telecommunications sector provides good opportunities for innovations, particularly for our youth. In order to stir growth in this sector and encourage local investment, import for assembly or manufacture of mobile phones will be imported duty-free under the South African Community Duty Remission Scheme. Mr. Speaker, leather and footwear sector has capacity for manufacturing footwear considering we have adequate raw materials. It is important for this sector to be protected from cheap imported products in order to encourage investments in the sector. In this regard, we have maintained the specific rates of duty in addition to 25% duty rate, which were granted last year. This will also safeguard government revenues by curbing undervaluation of such imported products. Mr. Speaker, there is need to protect local producers of electrical parts and accessories. In this regard, we shall be applying the imported duty rate of 35% instead of 25% on such products for 1 year. Mr. Speaker, the East African Community region has agreed to grant duty remission on raw materials and imports for manufacture of masks, sanitizers, ventilators, and personal protective equipment, including coveralls and face shields. This will enhance measures aimed at containing COVID-19 in addition to encouraging local production of such products. Mr. Speaker, as a long-term measure, the East African Community region has agreed to amend the East African Community Customs Management Act to exempt from import duty supplies for diagnosis, prevention, treatment, and management of epidemics, pandemics, and health hazards to deal with any future occurrences of such nature. Mr. Speaker, the government introduced a simplified monthly rental income tax in 2016 to enhance tax compliance. Under this regime, the rental income is taxed at the rate of 10% for individuals earning annual rent income of Kenya shilling 10 million and below. Mr. Speaker, the Kenya shilling 10 million per annum threshold has brought positive impact on tax compliance. I therefore propose to raise this threshold to Kenya shilling 15 million per annum in order to bring more landlords to the simplified regime. Mr. Speaker, some companies continue to declare losses year in, year out, hence not contributing to the exchequer in terms of tax revenue. However, these companies enjoy facilities such as infrastructure, whose cost of construction and maintenance is serviced by the government through tax revenues contributed by other patriotic taxpayers. In order to ensure all taxpayers contribute to the construction and maintenance of our infrastructure, I have proposed to introduce a minimum tax that will be payable by all companies at the rate of 1% of their gross turnover. Mr. Speaker, with the first advancement in technology, many business transactions are increasingly being carried out through digital platforms. In some cases, Due to the nature of the transaction, it is difficult to effectively tax the income derived through such platforms. It is therefore necessary to provide a framework that will facilitate taxation of such income. In this regard, I propose to introduce digital service tax on the value of transactions at the rate of 1.5%. Mr. Speaker, food security is one of the pillars of the Big Four agenda, and the government has put measures to support its implementation, including food production. To further this agenda, I propose to exempt maize or corn seeds from the value-added tax in order to make them affordable to our farmers. Further, I have proposed to exempt ambulance services from VAT in addition to medical, nursing, and dental services, which are currently exempt from VAT to cushion Kenyans from the high cost of such services. Mr. Speaker, to enhance tax compliance, I propose to introduce a voluntary disclosure program to allow Kenyans who in the last 5 years may have inadvertently made omissions in their tax returns to voluntarily disclose such omission and pay tax due. The program will run for 3 years. In order to encourage uptake of this program, I further propose to grant relief for penalties and interest in respect of the tax disclosed after payment of the principal tax. Mr. Speaker, currently, imports by Kenya Defence Forces and the National Police Services are charged import declaration fee and railway development levy. These charges reduce budgetary allocation of these institutions. I have therefore proposed to exempt from both the import declaration fee and railway development levy on all goods, including materials, supplies, equipment, machinery, and motor vehicles imported for official use by the Kenya Defence Forces and the National Police Service. Mr. Speaker, the government has been encouraging investments under the public-private partnership, particularly in the road sector. To further such partnerships, I propose to amend the Public Roads Toll Act to enable the persons who enter into an agreement with the government to collect road tolls on roads constructed and managed under such agreements. Mr. Speaker, the budget I have presented today involved making hard decisions in the quest to move our country forward. Faced with limited resources, the balancing has not been easy. We have channeled resources to cushion citizens and businesses from the adverse effects of COVID-19 pandemic, as well as interventions to support economic recovery. I firmly believe that the measures spelled out in this budget will create more jobs and transform the lives of Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, at the heart of these measures is our commitment to protect the lives and livelihood of citizens and support recovery of this country. I believe that working together, we will withstand the current storm as we have done in the past. Mr. Speaker, at this juncture, allow me to express my gratitude to His Excellency the President for his leadership and wise counsel in the management of economic and financial policies of this country. I would also like to thank my fellow cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, and their staff for contribution to the financial 2020-21 budget process. For their support during the preparation and approval of this budget, may I sincerely appreciate. My appreciation goes to honorable speakers of both National Assembly and the Senate and their respective clerks for overseeing the approval of submissions on the budget estimates, the financial 2020-21. Majority Leader, especially Honorable Duale of the National Assembly, as well as the Majority Leader of the Senate, Honorable Pugisio, for their relentless support to get most of the legislative proposals on finance matters passed through Parliament. Members of the Budget and Appropriation Committee, led by the Chairman and the Parliamentary Budget Office, for the constructive and comprehensive engagements in their approval process for the budget estimates for financial year 2020-21. Members of the Departmental Committee on the Finance and National Planning, led by Honorable the Chair, for their commitment and diligence in the approval of various tax laws processed during the year. All members of the various departmental committees of the National Assembly and Senate for their cooperation and support. The management and staff of Kenya Revenue Authority, Central Bank of Kenya, all regulators, and the various agencies under the National Treasury and Planning for their contribution and advice during the budget process. The Commission on Revenue Allocation and its chairperson for their contribution. Management and staff of National Treasury, under the leadership of the Principal Secretary, Dr. Muya, the officers tirelessly worked long hours, including most weekends and holidays, notwithstanding the constraining COVID-19 environment, to ensure that all budget and economic documents for the financial year 2020-21 are produced not only timely, but of high quality. These are the unsung heroes of this nation, and I appreciate their extra effort in this exercise. The management and staff of the State Department for Planning for the support, staff from the Attorney General's Office, our multilateral and bilateral development partners, as well as the private sector for their contribution to our development agenda through their technical and financial support, and the members of the fourth estate for actively keeping Kenyans informed of the developments in the country and their budget process for the financial year 2020-21. And finally, Mr. Speaker, I must express my sincere gratitude to Kenyans from all parts of the country for their insightful contributions, proposals, and suggestions as we finalize this budget. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been disruptive to our lives. I call upon Kenyans to pull together in the fight against the pandemic. Let us give safety and security of each other a priority. Follow the mandatory guidelines issued by the government on COVID-19 prevention as the country carefully and slowly begins to reopen for business and economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank our gallant health personnel who are on the front line of the COVID-19 war. Indeed, we can't thank them enough. May God bless them and their families for putting their lives as a shield for the rest of us against the virus. Mr. Speaker, we cannot forget the men and women in uniform and all the security personnel for maintaining law and order and safeguarding the security of the country. Mr. Speaker, my great appreciation goes to all Kenyans for demonstrating good citizenship by cooperating and supporting the government in this fight. Together, we have made good progress, and we still need to forge forward in our Kenyan spirit that we will win this war. Equally, Mr. Speaker, our heartfelt gratitude goes to the business community, donors and individuals who continue to donate resources to the Emergency Response Fund. The private sector has equally ensured that there are food supplies on our shelves, sanitizers are readily available, as well as masks that have greatly supported the common mwananchi. Mr. Speaker, I am well aware that the success of the measures I have outlined today will depend on the health behavioral change of our people. This strict discipline has been ably demonstrated by the health professionals in the fight against COVID-19 pandemic. Let us all pull together in observing the various protocols as advised by the Ministry of Health. I thank you all. May God bless you all and the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, in April 2020, I submitted the budget estimates together with accompanying documents. As I conclude, I further submit the following documents to this August House and request that you receive them. 1. Budget statement for 2020-21 financial year. Budget policy statement for the year 2020-20. Estimates of the revenue grants and loans for financial year 2020-21 budget. Financial statement for financial year 2020-21 budget. 2020 medium-term debt management strategy. Budget highlights, the Mwananchi Guide, financial year 2020-21 budget, and finally, the statistical annex of the budget statement for the financial year 2020-21. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honour members, I wish to thank the Cabinet Secretary from the National Treasury and Planning for having ably made the public pronouncement of the budget policy highlights for the national government for the financial year 2020-2021 and the medium term and the revenue-raising measures contained in its speech. Honour members, as you are aware, today's budget speech is not to be accompanied by the usual cocktail and courtesies. In this regard, honourable members and all guests are invited to depart, particularly from the precincts of Parliament, at their own pleasure. And the time now being 4:35 p.m. Honour members, the House stands adjourned till Tuesday, June the 16th at 10 a.m.
Parliament, where Treasury CS Ukur Yatani has just delivered the budget statement for 2020-2021 financial year. Of course, the CS started by explaining as to why there was a drop in the growth prospects. Remember, earlier on, Kenya's growth prospects were put at 6.1% in February, that is. That was reviewed to slightly above 2%. Of course, the growth prospects last year were at 5.4%. Of course, the CS once again explaining the impact COVID-19 has had in as far as the lockdown, the curfew are concerned, this affecting business hours and the operations of business across the country. Of course, the CS also pointing out to international trade and the reduction in the volume and of trade between countries and Kenya's ability to trade in the international markets. The CS has also pointed out at the financial aids that the country has received since the starting of the outbreak of COVID-19. This includes 73.8 billion shillings, which the country received from IMF, the International Monetary Fund, 6.8 billion shillings from World Bank, 22.5 billion shillings from Absa Bank. Of course, these are financial aids that the country has received from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and of course this Absa Bank. Absa being now rebranded from Barclays Bank. Let's get to some of the specifics in as far as the monies are concerned, the gainers. The presidency, of course, is gaining 25 billion shillings, the budget now being 36.63 billion shillings. This reason being the Nairobi Metropolitan Service budget is included in this budget. The education sector, 504 billion shillings. Infrastructure, 189.5 billion shillings. Interior and Security Affairs, 131.6 billion shillings. Treasury, 116.9 billion shillings. The Health Care System and the Health Ministry, 111.7 billion shillings. Water and sanitation, 77.7 billion shillings. Crop production and agri-research, 41.8 billion shillings. Let's get to some of the losers in this budget. The transport sector is the lead loser, losing 45 billion shillings. The defense, of course, another loser in as far as the budget is concerned. The budget for defense now being 115 billion shillings. Energy, 72.4 billion shillings. Devolution, 5.6 billion shillings. Parliament as well, a loser. Of more importance and significance is the rollout of the post-COVID-19 economic strategy. And these are some of the areas that the CS talked about in his presentation of the 2020-2021 budget. It talks of economic growth as being part of the strategy in as far as economic recovery is concerned, resource mobilization, supporting SMEs, of course this is investing in small, medium enterprises, ICT infrastructure, social protection and monitoring systems, of course this being part of the post-COVID-19 economic strategy that the CS has talked about in his presentation of the budget. The CS has also talked about the stimulus package. Remember the 8-point stimulus package that was put forth by President Uhuru Kenyatta to caution Kenyans from the economic effect of COVID-19. The CS talked about SMEs, the health, agriculture, tourism, environment, and of course a push for Buy Kenya and Build Kenya. Also a gainer from this year's budget is, of course, the hoteliering in as far as tourism is concerned. The allocations now being channeled to renovations and, of course, market in Kenya now within and domestic tourism being an ideal that the CS has also pointed out to. Of course, that was the budget statement. The CS also noted that some of the areas that may have caused a drop in as far as the projections are concerned, of course, is the locust invasion that has destroyed crop across the country and floods that have wreaked havoc across the country as well. This, of course, leaving the agriculture sector to be the highest hit sector in the economy. Of course, the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, I think we talked about that. This is also a day in which the East African countries are presenting their budgets. Of course, the East African countries, namely Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, presenting their budgets in as far as their financial plan is concerned. Just a reminder of some of the interesting points in as far as the allocations are concerned, rather. The health ministry gets 111.7 billion shillings. This is up from last year's budget, but nonetheless also this opened a gateway and flurry of areas of questions as to why there was no much money that was channeled to the health sector. The CS also talked about 5 billion shillings that will be used to repair damaged infrastructure, and in particular now roads due to the floods that have washed away many of the country's road network. The CS also talked about 10 billion shillings for the Kazi Mtaani program, which is set to employ 200,000 youths across the country in areas that the CS specified, inclusive of Nairobi, Mombasa, Eldoret. 200,000 youths are supposed to benefit from these 10 billion shillings for the Kazi Mtaani program. The education sector, of course, in reference to TSC, the employer of teachers across the country, should be smiling to the bank in as far as the allocation of this year is concerned. The CS also talked about the effect the global pandemic is having on international trade. And of course, this is not limited to regional trade as well, in as far as trade within African countries is concerned. Just a reminder of who the big gainers are: the presidency, education, infrastructure, interior in reference to security, treasury, health, water and sanitation, crop development and agribusiness, agri-research, social protection and senior citizens gets 116.9 billion shillings. Of course, the estimates of this budget were presented. The statement was read by the CS. And more importantly is your voice as a viewer. But what do you think has been of interest and impact to you from this budget? Just a reminder of the financial gains and aids that the country has received since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The CS noting that the country has received quite a number of billions of shillings in aid and loans from the IMF. And it was in particular that this loan from IMF, which was valued at 73.8 billion shillings, was zero interest rated. The World Bank has also offered the country money. Absa Bank, being a financial institution, has also offered the country money. Just a reminder that as well the growth projections were reviewed in February. The growth projections were estimated to have been at 6.1%, which is up from last year's 5.4%. That was reviewed to slightly more than 2.13%. Of course, that as well in doubt due to the economic hit and the longevity of the presence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember, Parliament adjourns till Tuesday, 16th June, and that is when the Parliament is set to resume. Just a reminder that the East African countries, namely Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, have also presented their budgets. And of course, tonight on Africa 411, this is what Eugene Anangwe will be putting piece together to understand the variance in as far as the budget is concerned in this part of the continent. Well, that is all what we had for you for that lengthy but special courtesy of you and of course the budget. I'm Abubakar Abdullahi on behalf of the entire team that made this production possible. Bye for now, but enjoy the rest of our programs.